Chapter 12:20. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. In these 3 days, Yaoguang, Xianyuan Weiyang, and the others also toured many interesting places in the academy with Li Zhichu. Of course, during this period, Li Zhichu also inquired about Ling Zhao's recent news. As for Xin Jing, Yuan Tianji, and the others, they each looked for disciples of the 4 courtyards to spar and discuss the Tao. Only Yang Yuan and Zhang Juji were now on a mission. They sneaked around the academy all day long, trying to find some useful information. Needless to say, with the luck of these 2 people, they really did find some secret. Although the Daotian Academy had 4 courtyards, there was only one scripture pavilion, located in the center of the 4 courtyards in front of the Elders' Hall. Normally, this scripture pavilion was not open to disciples. Only those who had made outstanding contributions to the academy had the chance to enter and choose cultivation methods to cultivate. It could be said that this scripture pavilion included many classics and divine abilities from the past 100,000 years of Qing Song. It was even rumored that there was a code that had been handed down for generations. It was the foundation of the Daotian Academy. Of course, a place like this would always be guarded by experts. At the very least, there were 2 Sage Realm Elders guarding the scripture pavilion every day. Given Yang Yuan's strength, it was clearly not very possible for him to sneak in without anyone noticing. Therefore, he needed an opportunity and someone to cover him. It was said that the scripture pavilion's guards were the most lax when the master of Daotian Academy appeared to give a lecture. At that time, all the elders of the academy would go to the lecture venue to listen to the sage's teachings. Perhaps that would be Yang Yuan's only chance. Although Yang Yuan felt a little guilty for stealing, he still felt a little guilty. But when he thought of the black-clothed figure that towered above the heavens and earth, the worries in his heart quietly dissipated. He had to obtain the reincarnation heavenly abode, or the myriad weapon Taoist scripture. Otherwise, even if he chased with all his might, he would still be too insignificant in front of the young master of the ancient clans. The Tao of cultivation was particular about wealth, techniques, companions, and land. Among them, the word wealth in the first place did not refer to ordinary spirit stones or treasures, but cultivation resources. With the foundation of the Ling people, not to mention that Ling Xiao was extremely talented, even a pig would be able to reach the supreme martial artist realm as long as it took medicine and cultivated step by step. The great Tao was fair. How laughable. Junior sister Xia, I want to go to the Elders' Hall to ask the elders some questions about cultivation. Do you want to come with me? Yang Yuan turned to look at Xia Zhiming beside him. His smile was bright, but his eyes seemed to be avoiding her gaze. All right. Xia Zhiming gently nodded and did not refuse. At this time, of course she knew what Yang Yuan was planning, but inexplicably, she really wanted to help him find that cultivation method as soon as possible. It was not that Xia Zhiming wanted to help Yang Yuan obtain the good fortune in the reincarnation heavenly abode. It was just that she had had enough of this senior brother who always raised flags. Haha, let's go then. Yang Yuan did not suspect anything and walked side by side with Xia Zhiming towards the center of the academy. At this time, in the Hanlin Academy, Zhang Juji was beside a group of academy disciples, carefully listening to their conversation. How do you think the young master of the Ling people is compared to senior brother Dao Wuyao? I think senior brother Dao Wuyao is stronger. After all, he is the only one who was brought there by the academy master to train his Dao heart. I wonder if senior brother Dao Wuyao will come out of seclusion with the academy master this time. He should. After all, senior brother has been in seclusion for 100 years. He should be able to enter the Saint Realm directly after coming out. That's too scary. A Saint Realm cultivator who is less than 400 years old. Senior brother Dao Wuyao should be able to enter the sequence. The sequence does not only look at cultivation, but also talent. That Yaoguang Bodhisattva and the young master of the World Lord's Hall are also not saints, but they are already in the sequence. That's true. However, I still think highly of senior brother Daoya. Hearing the discussion in front of him, Zhang Juji raised his eyebrows slightly, and a ray of light suddenly flashed in his eyes. That place? Listen, what did those words mean? It meant that even ordinary academy disciples did not dare to casually mention that place. Moreover, the place to train one's Dao heart was definitely filled with danger. It was definitely not a safe place. According to Yin, there was a sky demon sealed in the Daotian Academy. Do you understand? Such a sky demon treasure would definitely be carefully guarded by the Daotian Academy's master. In fact, in Zhang Juji's opinion, the Daotian Academy's master would very likely personally guard this treasure. Therefore, haha, senior brother, I wonder who the senior brother Daoya you mentioned just now is. Zhang Juji's expression was humble as he bowed to the academy disciples. Hearing that, they immediately frowned and looked over. When they saw Zhang Juji's ordinary face again, they sneered. You don't even know senior brother Daoya? This is my first time entering the world to cultivate. I'm ignorant and inexperienced. Senior brothers, please don't laugh at me. However, I've always heard that the Daotian Academy is the sacred land of the human race. There are countless monsters, and I have a lot of respect for them. I think that senior brother Daoya should be a true monster of our academy. Zhang Juji's temperament was much more flexible than ordinary Tianming. This could be seen from how he tricked Yin back then. Of course, with Yin's scheming, she was just using him to get out of the stupa abyss. The two of them could only be considered as scheming against each other. Hearing that, the academy disciples' faces immediately revealed a hint of pride. Of course, senior brother Daoya is also recognized as the #1 disciple of our generation. He's the best in the 4 academies. His talent is unparalleled. Oh, then where is this senior brother now? After hearing what you said, I can't hold back the excitement in my heart. I want to personally admire this senior brother Daoya's heroic appearance. Zhang Juji's smile was gentle, but there was a crafty look in his eyes. You came at the wrong time. Senior brother Daoya was already brought to the Saint Peak in the center of the academy to cultivate by the academy master 100 years ago. The disciples shook their heads. However, on the day of the academy master's lecture, perhaps senior brother Daoya will come out of seclusion. Saint Peak? What is that place? It sounds very awesome. Zhang Juji put his finger in his mouth and tilted his head, pretending to be ignorant and retarded. It's more than awesome. That's the place where our academy master secluded himself to comprehend the Tao all year round. There's a fairy's cave in there that's extremely mysterious. There's often Tao plasma flowing out. If you can enter it. Cough, cough. Junior brother Go, you talk too much. Be careful not to be punished by master. Right when one of the disciples surnamed Go wanted to explain in detail about this mysterious cave that flowed with Tao plasma, a disciple by his side suddenly interrupted him. Oh, I'm slightly unable to restrain myself when this cave is mentioned. Haha. Young man, I advise you not to be curious, because according to what those senior brothers of my academy said, this cave isn't a place you can enter as you please. If your body isn't strong enough, cough cough. In short, that's a restricted area of my academy, and you don't have the qualifications to enter. As soon as he finished speaking, all the disciples of the academy instantly walked away while laughing, leaving Zhang Juji standing on the spot by himself. The brilliance on his face had vanished long ago. Chapter 12:21. Mysterious Cave Entrance? Tao Paste? Forbidden Area of the Academy? Zhang Juji muttered to himself. He had a strange feeling when these words were put together. But, if this was only the place where the master of Daotian Prefecture was in seclusion, how could it be called a forbidden area? It was obvious that there were some secrets hidden in this. It was very likely that it was the Sky Demon's treasure that Inu mentioned. In 7 days, the master of Daotian Prefecture would appear and give a lecture. By then, it might be his only chance to get close to this mysterious cave. As for the senior brother Wuya that the disciples were talking about, Zhang Jiuji felt a little pressured. He was the champion of the 4 academies and had been in seclusion for 100 years. If he was just an ordinary youth of the same generation, Zhang Jiuji would not have any concerns. However, if this person really had the potential to be a sequence, he had to be more careful. After all, he did not dare to use the power of the 9 Suns Pagoda and Yin Yu casually in this academy. However, it seemed that Yin Yu's judgment was right. With the immortal spirit talisman concealing his aura, no one in the Daotian Academy would be able to recognize him. As such, he only needed to wait for 7 days. When the master came out of seclusion, he could enter the cave to explore its depths. At the thought of this, Zhang Jiuji could only feel a sense of pride in his chest. There was a trace of sinister evil in his eyes. Since he could not find an immortal, he might as well seek help from a demon. Since everyone in the world accuses him of being a demon, then he would use the demon path to prove that his Dao heart was pure. Creation was on his side. On the morning of the 4th day, above Dao Mountain, golden light filled the sky as the sun rose. There was a purple aura that rose 90,000 miles from the east. The clouds were blue and colorful. The sacred mountains and immortal trees had recovered overnight. Looking from afar, the entire Dao Mountain seemed to be covered in holy light. All kinds of strange phenomena could be seen rising into the sky, as if it was out of this world. In front of the Elder Hall in the center of the academy, the geniuses and demons from all over the Azure continent, as well as the disciples of the 4 academies, had already gathered. At this moment, in the square in front of the hall, there was a tall battle platform. The masters and elders of the 4 academies sat in front of the platform, looking at the 4 youths above. These 4 people were the ones who represented the 4 academies in the final battle in the Martial Arts Academy. Each of them was handsome and had a Dao aura around them. Lu Ming was dressed in black. He looked clean and handsome. His features were delicate and he had a certain charm to him. Today is the final battle between the disciples of the Daotian Academy. The winner will be qualified to enter the Hidden Scriptures Pavilion and choose an ancient scripture to cultivate. Furthermore, he will be given the title of the number 1 disciple of the 4 academies. On the fighting ring, a white-haired elder said indifferently, "For tens of thousands of years, the title of prime disciple had always been held by academy disciples. The Dao Academy was publicly acknowledged as the strongest academy among the 4 academies. This time, however, the first disciple of the Dao Academy, Dao Wuya, had gone into seclusion with the Academy Lord and had yet to emerge. The head disciple of the Puppet Institute, Wenren Zhiga, even went down to the Foliaceae and died. The one from the Path of Arrays had a frivolous personality. Just like his master, he didn't care about these titles and gave up on this competition of his own accord. On the other hand, Li Jichu's cultivation was not high. She was the only new chief disciple in the last 10 years. Once she was defeated, she would become a laughingstock. Therefore, Li Rulin didn't allow her to participate in this competition. Initially, everyone thought that this year's martial arts meet would be boring. Unexpectedly, there was a young disciple from the Confucian Academy called Lu Ming who defeated several 6th grade and 7th grade geniuses consecutively despite being a 5th grade venerable. Apart from Lu Ming, there was also a disciple from the Puppet Institute and 2 disciples from the Dao Academy standing on the fighting ring. Everyone knew that the path of array formation was particular about setting up an array and forming seals. However, it took time to do all this. Therefore, it was inevitable that one would be deliberately targeted in a head-on battle. Before one could display their true skills, they would be blasted off the fighting ring. The 4 of you draw lots to decide your opponent. The white-haired elder took out a bamboo tube with 4 bamboo sticks in it. Lu Ming and the others took out a bamboo stick from the tube and handed it back to the elder. Lu Ming from the Confucian Institute versus Wu Daji from the Puppet Institute. Chun Feng from the Tao Academy versus Gu Yuxiao from the Tao Academy. As soon as he finished speaking, the white-haired elder turned around and walked down the fighting ring. The two disciples from the Tao Academy followed behind him and walked down the fighting ring, leaving space for Lu Ming and Wu Daji. Haha, junior brother Lu has been in the limelight recently. I heard that you defeated several 6th grade and 7th grade senior brothers in a row? Wu Daji was thin and his face was gloomy. His red robe made him look sinister. However, since he could make it all the way to the final battle, one could only imagine his cultivation and means. A 7th grade venerable was already a top existence among the younger generation of the Daotian Academy. Since Wenren Zhiga's death, Senior Brother Wu had become the leader of the Puppet Institute. Senior Brother Wu. Lu Ming bowed slightly with a calm expression. Although he was only a 5th grade venerable, his cultivation technique was quite special. An ordinary venerable was definitely no match for him. In the 4 academies, the ones that Lu Ming took seriously were the chief disciples of the 4 academies. In particular, Dao Huia from the Tao Academy and Ning Chuan from the Array Academy. Of the two, one had a flawless Tao heart and cultivated the Taiyin Tao scripture. His every word and action implied the truth of the heavenly Tao. Now, the Academy Master had personally brought him to the Saint Peak to guide his cultivation. The other was born with array eyes and was extremely talented. Although he rarely fought, it was said that Dao Huia had once fought with him and was defeated. As for Senior Brother Wu Daji, although he was also a genius in the Tao of puppets, he was much weaker than Wenren Zhiga. Haha, young people are so proud and arrogant. Forget it, I'll spar with you today and let you know that the immortal path is unpredictable. Seeing that Lu Ming was neither servile nor overbearing, Wu Daji sneered. The moment he took a step forward, 2 puppets appeared behind him at the same time. Buzz! Both puppets were clad in heavy armor and looked as ferocious as demons. Evil aura surged around them and their claws were as sharp as blades. They had been tempered to be indestructible. As Wu Daji's hand seals changed, the 2 demonic puppets let out ear-piercing screeches and pounced on Lu Ming from both sides. Boom! The vast demonic power covered heaven and earth. At this moment, many disciples from the 4 courtyards had a mocking smile on their faces. Recently, Lu Ming had been too pretentious and had offended many geniuses from the 4 courtyards. As for Wu Daji's 2 demonic puppets, they were famous among their peers. It was said that the 2 puppets were found by the genius from the Puppet Institute in an ancient mystic realm. Their original forms were 2 ancient demons that were controlled by him using the Tao of puppet. Their killing power was terrifying. Even those who were at the peak of the venerable realm did not dare to fight them head-on. Lu Ming? Although this disciple from the Confucian Institute was indeed quite powerful and had embarrassed many people recently, he was at the peak of the venerable realm. It was as if he was facing 3 powerful figures at the 6th or 7th stage of the venerable realm at the same time. It was almost impossible for him to win. Between Lu Ming and Senior Brother Wu Daji, who do you think will win? After all, we can tell from his name that Senior Brother Daji is very talented. Senior Brother, what you said makes sense. Chapter 12:22. Boom. Boom. Demonic clouds surged in the void thousands of miles away. 2 demonic puppets stretched out their palms, piercing through the sky and pressing down on Lu Ming's head with unparalleled power. Even Li Zichu and the others had worried looks on their faces when they saw the ferocious aura fluctuating in the air. However, just when everyone thought that Lu Ming would be seriously injured or even defeated by the 2 demonic puppets, a dazzling divine glow suddenly bloomed around his body. It was a holy and gentle glow. It was bright and scorching, dispelling all the coldness in the area. Under everyone's shocked gaze, his body was pierced by the 2 demonic puppets' palms until it completely dissipated. It's an incarnation, It's actually an incarnation. Confucian Institute's righteous body. I didn't expect Lu Ming to have mastered this classic. The group of disciples shouted in shock. Obviously, they did not expect this young disciple from the Confucian Institute to be so talented. However, before they could be shocked, the void in front of Wu Daji suddenly fluctuated for a moment, and Lu Ming's figure appeared like a ghost. There seemed to be a wisp of evil energy circulating around his body. However, under the cover of the two demonic puppets' auras, even the masters of the 4 colleges did not detect any clues. Wu Daji's eyes narrowed slightly. The seals in his hands changed, and he hurriedly summoned the 2 puppets to defend against the enemy. However, at this moment, a faint smile appeared on Lu Ming's face. "Senior Brother Daji, it's too late." As soon as he finished speaking, there seemed to be a golden glow in his eyes, deriving many divine images. His palms gently pressed out. There were thousands of divine patterns in his palms, revealing a kind of overwhelming power that encompassed everything. Do you think you've won? Do you think those 2 demonic puppets are all I have? Childish. However, at this moment, there was no trace of panic on Wu Daji's face. Instead, there was a disdainful smile on his face. Afterward, he suddenly clenched his fists and directly shattered his outer clothes, revealing a sinister-looking pitch-black armor. This armor seemed to have merged with his body, appearing strange and inexplicable. In fact, the disciples of the 4 courtyards only knew that Wu Daji had found 2 ancient devil corpses in the secret realm and refined them into puppets, but they didn't know that he had obtained such a devil armor. However, this armor was a demonic item after all. Even with Wu Daji's strength, he only dared to merge with it after refining it for 100 years. Although he did not know the grade of the armor, he had tested it countless times. Even the attacks of the 2 devilish puppets could not shake the armor in the slightest. As such, who among his peers could be his match? Invincible! Today I'll show you the true power of my puppet institute. Wu Daji laughed maniacally, completely disregarding the young man in front of him. However, just as he was about to hold the teenager's hand in his, he saw a mocking smile on Lu Ming's face. Following that, an item seemed to have appeared in his hand. It was a transparent dagger flickering with 7-colored light. Before Wu Daji could react, Lu Ming waved his hand. A ray of dim light shot to heaven and earth, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Ah! A painful scream was heard immediately. Wu Daji, who had been in high spirits earlier, suddenly fell from the sky. His 2 outstretched arms were neatly severed by Lu Ming's dagger. Blood mist spewed out. It was a shocking sight. The devil armor that covered his skin was like a thin piece of paper. It could not withstand Lu Ming's power at all. How is that possible? The entire square was silent. There was a look of extreme shock on the faces of all the disciples and geniuses. Even Yao Guang's golden eyes seemed to reveal a trace of doubt. Just now, she actually sensed a trace of Buddha nature in the young man. Although it was very weak, Yao Guang still sensed it. He won? Junior brother Lu Ming. Well done! It was only when everyone from the Confucian Institute exclaimed in surprise that everyone recovered from their shock. Although they could not see clearly how Lu Ming had severed Wu Daji's arms, it was obvious that this young disciple of the Confucian Institute had once again turned the tables and successfully defeated an opponent with a higher cultivation level than him. Hearing the cheers below the fighting ring, Lu Ming turned his head indifferently and looked at the smiling lady in white in the crowd. At this moment, Li Jichu's face also revealed a trace of gentleness. Right from the beginning, she knew that this junior brother was not ordinary. From him, Li Jichu could always feel a kind of elegant, easygoing, resolute and unswerving character. He was righteous but did not fall in love. He was decisive in killing. The decree of the Confucian Institute was to establish a heart for heaven and earth, establish a life for the people, inherit the lost skills of the past sages, and establish peace for all ages. Now, it seemed that Lu Ming might be more suitable than her to be the first disciple. Junior brother, fly and amaze the world with a single brilliant feat, become the number one in the 4 courtyards. At that time, I will definitely report to Master and give you the position of the first disciple of the Confucian Institute. Then, I will travel the world with my sword and pursue the Tao in my heart. Senior sister, how do I compare to Ling Xiao now? Lu Ming's eyes were bright as he asked softly in his heart. If not for the fact that he had an obsession in his heart, he would definitely not reveal his trump card so easily. This immortal path was ancient and there should be nothing to worry about. However, Ling Zhao's appearance and Li Zichu's transformation had unknowingly affected his Tao heart. Chaos had arrived and thousands of talents were fighting for supremacy. Lu Ming would eventually become the true faith of Qing Tsang. The sky demon had appeared and there was nothing in the 9 heavens. A heaven-defying person had to face a calamity. Boom! At the same time, in the space of the illusory wall, at the peak of the mountain, 2 figures were as immovable as boulders. Both of them were surrounded by Tao runes and spirit splendor filled the sky. 2 divine figures, 1 dragon and 1 phoenix, towered between heaven and earth. Endless avatars rose alternately. Divine lightning, raging flames, ancient trees, and rivers lingered in all directions. It was as if a new era's painting was slowly unfolding. However, no matter how the avatars changed, the 2 figures seemed to be detached from the world and had the same lifespan as heaven and earth. Until thunderclouds began to gather in the void thousands of miles away. A vast sea of thunder fell from the sky, containing extreme destruction. However, unlike ordinary tribulation thunder, the color of the sea of thunder was a strange pitch-black color. There were wisps of golden splendor lingering in it, like the first ray of holy light that pierced through the darkness. It was sacred and could destroy all Taos. Ling Zhao's eyes suddenly opened. He looked calmly at the sea of thunder that spread out thousands of miles. Surprisingly, there was no trace of obstruction. Instead, he turned and walked into the distance. At this point, he had already integrated most of the Tao runes in this illusory space. However, Ling Xiao still had plans in his heart and did not take this opportunity to break through to the Saint Realm. Indeed, the system was his greatest reliance. However, relying too much on external forces was ultimately too much of a fluke. A supreme foundation was the greatest guarantee to reach the peak of the immortal path. On the other hand, Gu Chaoxiai's realm, which had fallen, finally showed signs of improvement at this moment. With the Tao runes in this place, it was enough to support her to step out of the shackles and achieve the true power of the Saint Realm. Have you reached the Saint Realm? My wife, you really didn't disappoint me. Chapter 12:23. Boom! When the golden radiance in the vast sea of lightning became extremely dazzling, the heavens and earth shattered. When the heavens and earth were created, the primordial aura of the great Tao began to surge. Billions of years had already withered. Time had passed quickly. What was eternity? The blue sky should be destroyed. Immortals and gods should fall. Only the lonely figure in the phoenix robe stood in the middle of the apocalypse. Her eyes were cold and her hair danced in the wind. She could start a new era. Gu Chaoxiai opened her eyes. There seemed to be billions of divine runes in her eyes. They were ancient and ancient. Just a ray of light from her eyes made the heavens and earth lose its color. Everything became silent. The thunderclouds in a radius of 90,000 miles shook violently. They actually showed signs of collapsing under her gaze. However, at this moment, Gu Chaoxiai did not look at the tribulation clouds. Instead, she turned to look at the figure in the sky. A faint smile suddenly appeared on her dreamy face. She was peerless and unparalleled in the world. Even with Ling Zhao's temperament, his eyes trembled slightly at this moment. There was an inexplicable fluctuation in his heart. Especially at this moment, Gu Chao Ci stood alone under the apocalyptic tribulation. Her hair danced in the wind, and her fair-skinned face was white. Even if time was shattered and the blue sky collapsed, she did not seem to care. Everything that entered her eyes was only a stubbornness. Reincarnation for thousands of years, the changes of eras, and no regrets. Ling Xiao. The galaxy is boiling. You are the ideal of the human world. Thousands of years have passed. You are the path of immortality. Boom! The sound of thunder was loud. It shook the mountains and rivers in a radius of 90,000 miles. Gu Chao Ci's brows were calm. She looked up at the vast sea of lightning. Then she stepped out. Her phoenix robe fluttered in the wind. Her hair drooped down. On her phoenix robe, golden threads flowed. She was like a proud nine heavens divine phoenix. She stepped towards the tribulation clouds. Below her feet, the two divine shadows of a dragon and a phoenix meandered into a sea. They were like a falling galaxy. They were like a celestial being. In the end, her figure entered the thunder clouds and disappeared. The entire world was filled with the sound of thunder. Bolts of blinding golden lightning descended from the sky, destroying everything in its path. It was as if everything in this illusory wall was illusory. People and time were illusory. They would shatter with a touch. Boundless, tranquil, world destruction, and new life. The originally opposing auras were quietly harmonized at this moment. Ling Zhao's eyes were clear, and his expression was indifferent. Then, he waved his hand, and the surging power of the world began to pour out. However, the illusory space in front of him had strangely disappeared without a trace. A storm was brewing in the realm. In the blink of an eye, the originally clear sky turned dark. Su Yan, Phoenix Rouge, Bai Ling, and the others woke up from their seclusion. They raised their heads in shock and looked at the heavenly thunder clouds that had suddenly appeared. At this moment, they seemed to see the silhouette of a peerless phoenix sitting quietly in the center of the lightning. Even if the world was overturned and the great Tao was obliterated, she remained unmoved. However, before they could cry out in alarm, Ling Zhao's figure had already descended from the sky and landed on top of the Sky Palace. At this moment, his expression was also somewhat solemn. The power of the tribulation lightning had already exceeded the range that the illusory space could withstand. Moreover, the Lord of Daotian Manor was about to give a lecture. With Gu Chao Ci's talent, she had already gone through 49 days of tribulation lightning the first time she became a saint. Presumably, it would be even longer this time. Although leaving her alone in the illusory space was not too surprising, it was still somewhat troublesome. After all, when the Lord of Daotian Manor appeared, Ling Xiao would have to prepare to fight for the demonic bone. Zhang Juji and Yang Yuan were already in position. However, it was still a little difficult for them to fight against a heavenly sovereign who had existed for countless years with just their luck. A heavenly sovereign who had taken responsibility for the revival of the human race, guarded the demonic bone, and had disciples everywhere. What he was after could not be fate. Could only be the world. Therefore, from the beginning, Ling Xiao did not see the Lord of Daotian Manor as a pedantic and stubborn antique. Instead, he saw him as a real opponent. Young master. Phoenix Rouge narrowed her eyes and looked at Ling Xiao in surprise. This is, in fact, she already had a guess in her heart. She was so magnificent and mighty. Other than praising the Empress, no one else could be brought into the realm by her young master to undergo tribulation. For the first time, Phoenix Rouge felt a real threat. No matter how exquisite her makeup was, it would only look vulgar in front of such a peerless empress. Even if she did not see Gu Chao Ci's face clearly, just her figure alone was already magnificent and clear, like the stars in the world. You don't have to care about her. Just cultivate on your own, Ling Xiao said indifferently as he raised his head to look at the figure sitting upright in the clouds. Divine rivers, starry seas, mountains, rivers, and the moon. Many mystical scenes lingered in the void. The Tao was formed naturally, and the saint's might was already evident. The clouds overlapped and the sky and the earth were one line. She was the only one in the entire world. Bai Ling, I have a task for you in a few days. Get ready. Ling Xiao turned to look at Bai Ling, then turned and disappeared. Behind him, Bai Ling's small face suddenly bloomed with a bright smile. Finally! She was going to contribute her strength to her brother? This feeling was very reassuring. Boom! Daotian Academy, in front of the Elders' Hall. On the battle platform, spirit power was overflowing, and the divine aura was fluctuating. Lu Ming stood with his hands behind his back. He looked at Gu Yuxiao, who was a disciple of the Daotian Academy, and nodded slightly. Senior Brother Gu, thank you for letting me win. Gu Yuxiao's face was gloomy, but at this moment, he was inexplicably doubtful and fearful. No, your aura is not right. When he fought with Lu Ming earlier, he could vaguely feel that there was a trace of coldness in his aura. Especially the last palm print. It seemed to be the righteous aura of Confucianism, but when it landed on Gu Yuxiao, it exploded with a shocking chill. This aura was definitely not a Confucianism technique. You, who exactly are you? Boom? Ha 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 ha. It's better to come at the right time. Has the number one of this cohort of the Daotian Academy been decided? It was just that. Just as Gu Yuxiao's expression was furious and he was about to exclaim, a wisp of dark clouds suddenly covered the sky above. Afterward, there was a burst of wild laughter. Endless demonic aura transformed into a sea, covering the sky and the earth. Under the demonic aura, several figures stood in the void, looking at Lu Ming, who was on the battle platform, with mocking gazes. There were 5 young men and women. They were incomparably handsome, and their auras were vigorous and mighty. How dare you, evildoer! How dare you behave atrociously in our Daotian Academy? The expressions of the elders of the Academy changed abruptly. There was a strong sense of shock and astonishment in their eyes. Although, now that the Academy Master was giving a lecture, the Daotian Academy had removed the sect protection array. However, to be able to avoid the soul consciousness of several Sage Realm powerhouses stealthily, it was obvious that the identities of these 5 young men were not ordinary. Furthermore, to dare to provoke the Academy Master during such a grand event like the Academy Master's lecture, these 5 people were most likely the true demons of the demon clan. Boom! In an instant, there was a vast and mighty spirit power in the Academy, shattering the wind and clouds and soaring into the sky. Elders. But, at this moment, a cold and gentle voice suddenly came from behind the 5 of them. A graceful figure in golden clothes with fiery red hair stepped out slowly and appeared at the end of everyone's line of sight. On that fair and flawless face, there was a gentle and indifferent smile. In particular, the cinnabar in between her eyebrows made the blue sky dim and lose its brilliance. She stood in the sky, looking down at the clouds and mist below. As she looked around, there seemed to be a sense of tenderness and affection. Just a wisp of light from her eyes made the bodies of countless clan elites tremble and their breathing quicken. Compared to all the women of the human clan present, this beautiful figure in golden clothes was more noble and ostentatious. In the entire world, she was the only one who was dazzling. Furthermore, in the entire Azure continent, the only person who could be compared to her was probably the great Empress Immortal Phoenix, who had yet to come out from the illusion wall. You. Who are you? Chapter 12:24. It's not important who I am. What's important is, I heard that the Daotian Academy has always emphasized education without discrimination. I have long admired it. I came here today with no ill intentions. I just want to spar with the geniuses of the Academy. May I know why the elders are so angry? The golden-robed woman stood proudly at the top of the sky. She looked elegant and noble. Her fiery hair danced like flames, containing infinite divinity. Divine patterns of the great Tao flickered in and out of her golden eyes. Her heavenly might was naturally formed. The 5 demon geniuses, who were originally arrogant and domineering, actually took the initiative to retreat behind her. They looked like they were obedient to her orders. The demons did not enter the 100 talents and did not enter the sequence. The Realm Lord established the Azure Continent and set the rules. Demons, ghosts, and Xian Yuan clan were not allowed to step into the Azure Continent. Otherwise, it would be considered a provocation and they would be killed without mercy. Originally, these 3 clans mostly hid in the polar regions of the Azure Continent. Very few people entered the world in the past 100,000 years. Therefore, apart from the few demon young masters and the descendants of the ghosts, the other geniuses were mostly unknown. They were not as famous as the humans. Now that the Realm Lord was missing, these so-called rules were naturally less intimidating. Moreover, the rules only said that the strong could not enter the world. It did not say that the people of the current generation could not. The 6 people who suddenly appeared at this time were all of the younger generation. However, the demonic aura fluctuating from their bodies was as vast as the sea. It was obvious that they did not come with good intentions. The Daotian Academy's education without discrimination is only for the humans. I'm afraid you have come to the wrong place. The Tao Academy's master, Dao Shenji, looked up at the 6 figures in the sky and said coldly, "In this chaotic world there were many geniuses. Although the demons were suppressed by the Realm Lord, their foundation was not something that a single clan or clan could contend against. Therefore, he did not dare to act rashly at this time. He was afraid that he would fall into the demon's trap. One should know that the 4 polar regions of the Azure Continent were all desolate lands. The demons were originally powerful and were once the main characters of the world. They must be unwilling to accept this. If the 6 of them came here just to provoke, they would definitely become the subject of ridicule once the powerful cultivators of the Daotian Academy took action to suppress them. It might even cause the second great war between humans and demons in the last 100,000 years. Haha, you must be the Tao Academy's lord. The Tao Academy's lord's might is unparalleled, and his reputation is widespread. I don't think he would attack us juniors." The golden-robed woman smiled calmly. Even in the face of a true powerhouse of the human race, he did not bow in the slightest. Instead, he was somewhat disdainful. However, at this moment, her eyes seemed to be drifting as they swept past the crowd. In the end, there was actually a trace of disappointment in her eyes. Those who challenge the dignity of the human race will not be pardoned. Dao Shenji frowned slightly, his tone inexplicably gloomy. At that moment, he could feel that the demonic aura emitting from the woman was extremely terrifying. Even a supreme being like him felt an indescribable sense of fear when he sensed the energy fluctuations that were as vast as the sea of stars. Obviously, with the strength of these academy disciples, it would be difficult for anyone of the same generation to contend with them. Challenge? The Daotian Academy recruits aspiring youths from all over the world. Today, the Academy Master's Lecture is a grand occasion for the Azure Firmament Academy. We came all the way here just to admire the heroism of the human race's heavenly prodigies. Is this a challenge in the eyes of the Tao Academy's lord? The golden-robed woman smiled faintly, but the mockery in her eyes was not concealed in the slightest. Should I call you humans cowardly, or sinister and hypocritical? Boom! Spirit aura surged across the entire mountain peak. Even the most cowardly of the human race disciples were enraged and shocked when they heard the golden-robed woman's words. They really could not figure out who this young woman was. How could she not care about the 4 Academy Masters at all? Academy Master? Let me teach these arrogant bastards a lesson. That's right. Academy Master, we can't let them underestimate the strength of the human race. How dare you demons? You don't know what's good for you. Around the square, The disciples of the various clans immediately roared in anger and helplessness. Meanwhile, the golden-robed woman and her companions looked at the crowd below with provocative expressions. Their eyes were full of playfulness. Now that the Realm Master was missing, the demon race had the ambition to conquer the world again. The 6 of them came today to test the Realm Master's palace's attitude. Perhaps they could use this as an excuse to stir up new chaos in the Azure Sky continent. Chaos had arrived. However, this chaos was not enough for the demon race and the forces of the 4 extremes. The Sky Demon had appeared. Now that the human race was facing a great calamity, the Realm Master still did not appear. This meant that, perhaps he was really not in this world anymore. As long as the demon race could occupy the providence of the Azure Sky continent, even if the Realm Master returned, what could he do? Even with the immortal demon Ancient Bell, one snow-tide rock would not be able to suppress the thousands of races in the Azure Sky continent. Alright, since the demon race wants to fight, how can we, the prodigies of the human race, retreat? Dao Shenji nodded with a gloomy expression. If Wu Ye was here, he would not be too worried. However, other than Li Jichu, who had the lowest cultivation level among the 4 academies, the other 3 were either dead or in seclusion. They were not here at all. At this moment, everyone was enraged. Once the Daotian Academy took half a step back, the human race would lose its strength of character. The Daotian Academy could not bear this humiliation. Academy Master, you're exaggerating. We're just exchanging pointers and have no intention of provoking you. Of course, the golden-robed woman descended from the sky. There seemed to be divine flames floating under her feet, burning thousands of miles of the Azure Sky continent. Her figure leisurely sat on an elder's seat in front of the battle stage with her legs crossed. A brilliant and overbearing smile suddenly blossomed on her flawless face as she turned to look at the 5 youths who had landed behind her. If Academy Master insists that we're provoking you, then you'll beat them to death later. You! Dao Shenji and the other 3 Academy Masters looked at each other. Their gazes were deep and solemn. Haha, since the demon race wants to see the prodigies of the human race's prodigy's strength, does anyone want to come up and try? At this moment, Li Rulin suddenly smiled and looked at the crowd with a gentle gaze. With the prodigies of the Daotian Academy, it would be difficult to win this battle. Once they were defeated, they would not be able to live up to their reputation. However, if the contestants were prodigies from various races, even if they were defeated, it would not have much to do with the Daotian Academy. I'll take on the first battle. On the battle platform, Lu Ming sighed softly. His righteousness soared into the sky, stirring up the wind and clouds. Especially the resolute and cold determination in that pair of black eyes, it caused Gu Yuxiao to be even more shocked. The words that were originally at the tip of her tongue were all swallowed back down. That was right. When Lu Ming defeated him earlier, the technique that he used was indeed strange. However, what did it matter? Now that he was representing the human race, the stronger he was, the stronger he would be. Forget it. There was no need to care about the title of the top student of the 4 academies. As long as junior brother Lu could defeat these arrogant demons and bring glory to the academy, so what if he cultivated as a ghost or a demon? The righteousness of the race was always above everything else. Junior brother. It was just that. Just as Lu Ming turned his head and looked at the golden-robed woman with battle intent, a low shout suddenly came from below the battle platform. A tall figure stepped out from the crowd and stood on the battle platform. He held a dragon halberd in his hand and pointed it at the 6 demons. Chapter 12:25. Junior brother, you just went through a huge battle. Let me take over this battle. Yuan Tianji looked at the 6 demons coldly, his face full of fighting spirit. Seeing this, Li Rulin nodded immediately. Lu Ming, take a rest first. The reason why he used the righteousness of the human race to guide the elites was because he wanted to win this battle with the help of these human elites. Although the 6 demon youths each had a strong demonic aura and were extremely powerful. However, there were still a few human echelon cultivators standing below the battle platform. They were all heroes of the present age. Yao Guang, the Bodhisattva of the West Pole, was born with a Buddhist nature and was truly at the top of the world. Even Yuan Tianji, Wu Lei, Shen Jingan, and the rest were famous and outstanding among their peers. With them taking on the enemy, the human race might not lose this battle. However, what puzzled Li Rulin was which clan did these demon youths come from? What was their real motive for coming here? The Heaven Pole God of War has shown the might of the human race. The God of War is invincible, all the heaven's favorites exclaimed in excitement. Yuan Tianji, the successor of the God of War Palace. This young war god had already proven his talent in the divine Tao stage just now. Although in the end, his achievements were completely overshadowed by Lord Ling Shao and praising the Empress. However, 799 divine level was still a height that most of the elites present could not reach. Feng Yan, you go. Seeing Yuan Tianji in heavy armor and holding a divine halberd, the golden-robed girl's lips curled into a sly smile. Any cultivator who used a halberd must have extremely terrifying physical strength. However, no matter how terrifying it was, how could it be compared to the demon race? Yes, Miss Huang. Beside her, a burly youth with a head full of white hair grinned and took a step forward. His figure instantly turned into a graceful swan and descended from the sky. Boom! An ear-piercing buzzing sound suddenly resounded. Billowing demonic aura turned into long clouds outside Feng Yan's body. He did not give Yuan Tianji any time to exchange pleasantries and suddenly struck with his palm. Humph! You are courting death. Yuan Tianji's eyes trembled slightly. At this moment, he could feel the terrifying pressure in the space around him. He didn't dare to hesitate in the slightest. The dragon halberd in his hand shot out a spiritual radiance as it transformed into a dragon and stabbed out. Woo 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 woo. The blue sky wailed as 10,000 daos bloomed. A strand of black light stretched out for thousands of miles and tore through space, completely sealing off Feng Yan's path of retreat. However, in the face of Yuan Tianji's absolute halberd move, the monstrous race youth didn't have a trace of seriousness on his face. Instead, he looked disdainful. Then, his hand seals began to appear, and layers of feathers began to appear on his palm. Yuan Tianji's halberd finally collided with the demonic claw. Boom! Thunder resounded as the blue dome of heaven shattered. What was even more frightening was that the scene of Feng Yan vomiting blood and flying backward, as everyone had imagined, did not happen. On the contrary, he clenched his fist and directly grabbed the halberd. Before Yuan Tianji could react, he pulled the halberd. Yuan Tianji's eyes narrowed as a dazzling divine radiance erupted from his body. His entire body suddenly grew taller and stronger, like a true god of war. He threw a punch at Feng Yan. Oh, interesting. Seeing this, Feng Yan laughed instead of being surprised. He casually threw a punch and collided with Yuan Tianji. Boom, boom, boom. Above the void, the two figures alternated as their bodies constantly collided. Tao patterns and demonic qi filled the air, intimidating everyone. However, gradually, Yuan Tianji's aura rapidly weakened. His outer armor shattered, and his figure was directly smashed down by Feng Yan's punch, falling onto the battle stage. Boom! Smoke and dust rose as the entire battle stage instantly shattered. Feng Yan stood in the void, coldly looking at the figure that struggled several times but failed to stand up. He smiled contemptuously. This is your human race's god of war? You can't even withstand a single blow. Hearing this, Yuan Tianji immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were filled with defeat. At this moment, more than half of his bones had already been broken. Even his internal organs in his dantian were about to shatter under Feng Yan's repeated attack. No matter how unwilling he was still disheartened and his eyes were filled with sorrow. Next, Feng Yan turned his head and looked at the many human race geniuses below the battle stage. At this moment, the crowd was no longer as noisy and angry as before. Yuan Tianji had been defeated. In just a few breaths, he had been utterly defeated. Although the successor of the god of War Palace wasn't the strongest in the human race, he was still a well-known figure among the crowd. Even Shen Jingan, Wu Lei, and the others might not be his match even if they used all their strength. However, he was still defeated and couldn't hurt Feng Yan at all. What? Is there no one else? Feng Yan sneered and looked arrogant. Weren't you very arrogant just now? Let me. Wu Lei took a deep breath. The feeling of being looked down upon by the demon race was extremely depressing. Although he might not be Feng Yan's match with his strength, the human race couldn't lose its backbone. Why don't all of you come at me together? I'm afraid you're not enough. Feng Yan shook his head and looked down at the crowd. His light brown eyes were filled with disdain. Humph! Arrogant! Wu Lei's face darkened and he suddenly stepped forward. However, the moment he appeared on the battle stage, the figure in the void suddenly clenched his fist. A sacred sun sunk from the horizon and was actually held up by him with one hand. Boundless multicolored light fell from the sky, crashing down toward Wu Lei. Divine light surged and the heavenly Tao shook. Endless Taoist rhymes flowed and spewed out like a dazzling galaxy. Wu Lei's face changed drastically and his body suddenly lit up. However, before he could do anything, he was annihilated by the divine light and no longer made a sound. Heaven and earth fell silent. The entire mountain of paths was still. Intense shock and fear appeared on the faces of all the human race geniuses. Originally, everyone thought that Feng Yan's strength lay in his physical strength. However, it seemed that the reason he competed with Yuan Tianji in terms of physical strength was actually to deliberately humiliate him. Pfft! The geniuses only recovered from their shock when they heard another cry of blood from the battle stage. At this moment, Wu Lei's figure knelt on the ground. He was covered in blood and looked as though he was burned by flames. Even his skin emitted a burning stench. As for his aura, it had withered to the extreme. He was killed in one move. In fact, if not for the fact that this was the sacred ground of the human race and the group of demon youths had some reservations, Wu Lei and Yuan Tianji, the two outstanding talents of the current generation, would not have the slightest chance of survival. Everyone knew that the combat strength of the demon race was above that of the human race. However, no one expected that this kind of strength was so direct that there was no room for comparison at all. Suppression, silence, shame. Could it be that the human race was really going to be suppressed and intimidated by a few demon youths in the sacred ground of the academy today? Sigh. Below the battle stage, Lu Ming sighed softly. He was about to lift his leg and walk towards Feng Yan when he suddenly heard a buzzing sound in the distance. Buzz! A terrifying wave that made one's scalp turn numb swept out from the depths of the academy and spread over the sky. Everyone was stunned and turned to look. In the next moment their eyes narrowed. Chapter 12:26. Buzz! The void trembled as purple clouds rose. Amidst the clouds, a white-robed figure stood in the clouds with his hands behind his back. He arrived in front of everyone with a single step. It was a young man with a cold and resolute face. His black hair was tied into a Taoist bun with strands hanging down. He looked otherworldly and elegant. Although there was no aura emanating from his body, just by standing there, he made the world fall silent and the sun and moon lose their light. In particular, his fair and handsome face made many geniuses' expressions freeze. Their red lips were tightly pursed, and their eyes revealed a hint of surprise. It's Senior Brother Wuya. Senior Brother Wuya has come out of seclusion. Waves of cheers resounded, and a wisp of indescribable excitement appeared on the faces of countless Academy disciples. Boundless Tao, the true number one of the Daotian Academy's generation. His talent was unparalleled, and his Taoist techniques were natural. He was the only disciple in the past 10,000 years who had been brought to the Saint Peak to cultivate by the Academy Master. Unexpectedly, Senior Brother Wuya came out of seclusion when the human race was in danger. Senior Brother Wuya, please strengthen the human race. Senior Brother Wuya, strengthen the human race. Cheers suddenly resounded. Countless Academy disciples clenched their fists and shouted at the top of their lungs. The defeat of Yuan Tianji and Wu Lei had already caused many people to despair. After all, with their strength, they were at the top of the human race. However, they were not a match for the demon race youth. The appearance of Boundless Tao was a kind of hope for everyone. Boundless Tao? In front of the crowd, the golden-robed woman nodded slightly with a bright smile. She had some understanding of the sequence and heavenly elites of the human race before coming. The number one of the 4 academies was not in the sequence only because he had already been in seclusion when he was at the peak of his power. After 100 years, although he had not stepped into the saint realm, he had a trace of nature's will. Obviously, this was a strong enemy, far from what the 2 from before could compare to. Feng Yan, come back. Yes. Feng Yan frowned slightly. The surging battle intent in his eyes quietly turned cold. He descended from the sky and landed behind the golden-robed woman. At this moment, although he was unwilling in his heart, he obviously did not dare to disobey in the slightest. Everyone's eyes flashed with a trace of astonishment when they saw this scene. Just what was the identity of this lady in gold? Why was even Feng Yan so respectful towards her? Mo Ling, you go. The golden-robed woman smiled gently. Even though she had never seen Boundless Tao in action, compared to the human race, the demon race's advantage lay in their physical abilities. So what if it's the nature of the Tao? Mo Ling's innate divine ability was something that even she was extremely wary of. Yes, Miss Huang. Behind him, a gloomy-looking young man in black immediately bowed and saluted. Then, he took a step forward and wind swirled around him. He turned into a blur and appeared on the battle platform. 9th rank of the Exalted Realm, you're very strong. Mo Ling raised his head and looked at Dao Wuya coldly. Compared to Feng Yan, his personality was calmer, but his every move carried a wisp of gloominess, causing people to feel inexplicably fearful. You're not bad yourself, Imperial Wind Power. Dao Wuya looked indifferent. When he was on the Saint Peak, he had already felt the spiritual might and demonic qi. Originally, he had already made up his mind to not come out of seclusion until he reached the Saint Realm. But the dignity of the human race was not to be challenged. Moreover, if these demons defeated the current generation of geniuses at the Daotian Academy today, this sacred land of the human race would become a complete laughingstock. As the current number one of the 4 academies, Dao Wuya would not allow this to happen. Ha ha ha, not bad? After so many years, this is the first time someone has said that I'm not bad. Mo Ling shook his head and smiled. His body suddenly rose into the sky. Around him, endless demonic light surged, vast and ferocious. Then, he pressed down with his palm and the world instantly turned dark. His body strangely disappeared from everyone's sight. Dao Wuya frowned slightly. His eyes overflowed with clear light and thousands of Dao inscriptions. It was unknown when a green ancient sword had appeared in his hand, and an extremely cold aura quietly filled the entire area. Buzz. Tens of thousands of sword light slashed horizontally, and a crack appeared in the originally dark sky. The sun shone down and light reappeared. But now, Dao Wuya's face did not relax at all. Instead, he became even more cautious, because at this moment, he still could not sense the aura of the demon youth. It was as if he had completely disappeared without a trace. Not even a trace of his aura was left. Buzz. Suddenly, there was a buzzing sound in the sky. One after another, ink-colored feathers appeared at the end of the sky eerily. Flames burned on them, and they contained a terrifying heat that made one's heart palpitate. Then, under everyone's shocked gaze, the countless ink-colored feathers suddenly turned into a black torrent and enveloped Dao Wuya. That speed was extremely fast. Like a bird descending to the world, it instantly appeared above the head of the Academy's number 1. Seeing this, countless people's faces changed, and their eyes trembled. Some of the more cowardly people had already closed their eyes and turned their heads, their bodies trembling. This kind of attack was simply unavoidable. Even if Dao Wu Ya's cultivation was terrifying, he would not be able to escape unscathed. Buzz. However, what was surprising was that Dao Wu Ye did not have any intention of retreating. Instead, he turned into a green rainbow and used his sword to split open the sky, going against the rain of feathers. Just now, the moment the attack landed, he sensed a trace of Mo Ling's aura. And with this demon prodigy's methods, once he hid in the dark and focused on sneak attacks, even Dao Wu Ye would have a headache. Boom! Boom! Boundless strange phenomena bloomed in the sky, and the killing intent was immeasurable. Around Dao Wu Ye, clear light danced for thousands of miles, forming its own spiritual aura. And when the rain of feathers descended about 10 feet away from him, it was shattered by an invisible sword aura. It turned into flowing flames, and it was extremely dazzling. But with Dao Wu Ye's speed, he was no match for Imperial Wind Mo Ling. Therefore, when he appeared in the depths of the dark light, there was no trace of Mo Ling. At the same time, a new round of feathers condensed and came down from the sky. Damn it! That demon prodigy is so cunning. He only dares to hide in the dark. If this continues, Senior Brother Wu Ye will be exhausted to death. That's right. If you have the guts, show yourself and fight. What's the point of hiding? Below the battle stage, countless disciples were filled with righteous indignation. Clearly, they were not happy with Mo Ling's method. Show yourself and fight? As if hearing the crowd's mockery, a cold laugh came from the depths of the void. Then, Mo Ling's figure appeared in the sky. He stood in the air and looked down at Dao Wu Ye coldly. At the moment, there were many bloody wounds on the latter's body. They were so deep that his bones could be seen. However, his aura did not weaken in the slightest, and even his face was cold and indifferent. Fine, then I will let you human ants see the true power of the Black Mandarin tribe. Mo Ling grinned, revealing a mouthful of sharp white teeth. Behind him, a demon shadow descended from the sky. Its wings were hundreds of feet long, covering the sky and burning with endless death flames. Black Mandarin tribe? Chapter 12:27. The Black Mandarin Duck Clan? Why have I never heard of this clan? Many of the Academy's disciples looked at each other. Clearly, they had never heard of the demon tribe in the extreme south. Black Mandarin Duck? Even the 4 hall masters were at a loss at first, until Li Rulin's expression changed. His eyes were suddenly filled with shock. This clan it's a branch of the Divine Feather Race, the number 1 race of the Divine Feather Race, 100,000 years ago under the command of that demon monarch. Dao Shenji's eyes were gloomy and he suddenly sighed softly in his heart. Never would I have imagined that this race would also come into being. As everyone knew, there were a total of 10 demon lords in the southernmost region. Their counterparts were the top overlords of the 10 demon regions. However, the 10 overlord clans, or 9 of them, were all vassals of one of the clans 100,000 years ago. At that time, the demon race only had one monarch, and he was called the Undying Demon Monarch. There were many different rumors about this demon race's mighty figure. Some said that his lifespan was limitless, and that he was immortal and indestructible. Others said that his talent was heaven-defying, and that he could sever his own reincarnation cycle. Back then, when the Realm Lord was conquering the heavens and earth, this demon emperor happened to seal his own bloodline and become undying. Hence, he was suppressed by the immortal devil Ancient Bell and hadn't appeared ever since. Of course, no one knew if the rumors were true or false. But now, the clansmen he left behind were the most powerful clan in the extreme south, the Divine Feather Clan. Rather than calling them clansmen, it would be more appropriate to call them the former subordinates of the Demon Emperor. This was because this clan did not refer to a bloodline inheritance. Instead, it was an ancient clan formed by countless demon experts who were willing to guard the faith of the Demon Emperor. Most of these experts of the demon race were feathered birds, which was why they were called the Divine Feather Race. And the Black Mandarin race was one of them. It was rumored that the Holy Feather Race had 9 demonic veins, and each demonic vein had a terrifying foundation that was comparable to the 10 demon clans. However, in the past 100,000 years, the Divine Feather Race had stood aloof from worldly affairs and had never fought for the power of the demonic beast race. Thus, they were gradually forgotten by the world. Only those who had truly experienced the first great calamity of the Qing Tsang tribe knew the supreme prestige of this tribe. Could it be that that person is still alive? The 4 hall masters looked at each other, their eyes solemn. The situation was getting more and more complicated. The situation in Azure Mountain was on the verge of chaos. The sudden appearance of the Divine Feather Race was definitely not done on a whim. However, even if the 9 bloodlines flourished at the same time, now that 100,000 years had passed, this clan would definitely not be able to contend against the Realm Lord Hall. Unless the deathless Demon Emperor was not dead and had returned. In an instant, even with the temperament of the 4 great hall masters, they felt a chill rising from the soles of their feet. It was rumored that this Demon Emperor cultivated the 9 heavens death flame, which could burn everything. His temperament was extremely violent. Back then, when the Realm Lord used the immortal devil Ancient Bell to suppress him for 100,000 years, he must have a lot of hatred in his heart. Now that the Realm Master was missing, it was unknown who in this world could stop his anger. Ling people? We can only wait and see, one step at a time. Li Rulin sighed softly. His expression was weathered. The other 3 hall masters also sighed silently. Their faces were already ashen. Boom! On the battle platform, Mo Ling stood in the air. The demonic shadow behind him flapped its wings and covered the sky. A violent gust of wind suddenly rose, stirring up waves for thousands of miles. On the mountain of Dao, gravel flew everywhere, and the ancient trees were all broken. Endless demonic chi turned into long clouds, covering the sky and earth. It was as if a great demon had appeared, shocking everyone. If you can withstand this attack of mine, I will consider you the winner of this battle. Mo Ling smiled evilly, raised his hands, and pressed down. Buzz! Suddenly, the sky and earth cried, and thousands of Daos went silent. In the void thousands of miles away, a pair of black wings suddenly opened, and then crushed the void, turning into an aurora and falling. Vast demonic chi swept across the sky. Everyone could only see a black whirlwind falling from the sky, destroying everything. The demonic power was at its peak, and the heavens were unparalleled. An indescribably sharp wind, accompanied by a series of strange cracking sounds, rang out. The moment the demonic shadow fell, it turned into a stream of light and shattered. Millions of feathers appeared, and each of them seemed to be surrounded by the destructive aura of the great Tao. Like a black flood, it poured into the world, forming an abyss in the void. Even the sky and earth seemed to be unable to withstand this demonic power and shattered. Oh no, the 4 deans' expressions changed, and there was nothing but fear in their eyes. Even a sage realm elder might not be able to withstand such an attack, let alone Daoya, who had yet to enter the sage realm. The appearance of the Holy Feather Race would definitely shock the azure heavens and re-establish its supremacy. Most likely, this Mo Ling was also extremely famous in the divine feather race, unparalleled in the world. But Wu Ya. We can't attack, and you can't attack even if you die, because this concerns the strength of the human race and the sacred name of the Academy. Strangely, as the Daotian Academy looked at the densely packed and boundless terrifying attacks, the entire Daotian Academy suddenly fell silent. Only the whistling of the wind could be heard in their ears, and the past was like smoke in their eyes. At this moment, no one believed that Dao Wuya could withstand this attack that was comparable to a Sage Realm expert. Especially under the restrictions of the battle platform, Senior Brother Wuya could not dodge at all. He would definitely die. However, if Senior Brother Wuya died, who else in the academy could stop these 6 demonic youths? More importantly, Feng Yen was not defeated, and so was Mo Ling. On the other hand, the human race had already lost 3 outstanding talents in a row. Could it be that today, the human race was destined to be nailed to the pillar of shame? Many geniuses raised their heads and looked at the white-robed figure on the battle platform, feeling sad and ridiculous. Buzz! At this moment, the green sword in Dao Wuya's hand suddenly lit up with a ray of clear light. There are 7 Azure Sword Immortals, and 2 in this generation. I, Dao Wuya, am not in the sequence and have not become an immortal, but I will definitely win this battle. There are countless geniuses in the human race, and I, Daotian Academy, am only one of them. I will remember this shame. As long as the inheritance is not lost, the human race will be immortal. A calm voice sounded leisurely. The fear in everyone's hearts suddenly calmed down. The bodies of countless disciples trembled. Their eyes were filled with sorrow and tears began to fall unknowingly. Especially at this moment, the figure that soared into the sky, holding the sword and facing the 100,000 feather swords with no regrets, revealed an ancient determination and righteousness. The backbone of the human race. So this chaotic world could really prove the strength of the human race. Senior Brother Wuya, let us strengthen the human race. Senior Brother Wuya, please strengthen the human race. Boom! The sound of swords suddenly resounded between heaven and earth. In Dao Wuya's hand, the green sword pointed to the sky and destroyed thousands of feather swords. Clang, clang! Shocking sword chi appeared, containing an undying will to annihilate everything and not retreat. In an instant, immortal radiance filled the sky, and auspicious clouds broke through the sky. As for the white-robed figure, he was finally annihilated by the torrent of feather swords, and there was no more sound. Heaven and earth were sorrowful, and the wind was gentle. At this moment, even the 6 demonic youths seemed to be moved. Clearly, they were also shocked by Dao Wuya's actions. An outstanding talent of the current generation died a worthy death. Chapter 12:28. Senior Brother Wuya. Around the square, countless academy disciples clenched their fists, their eyes filled with sorrow. Even if Dao Wuya's talent was unparalleled, under such a demonic technique, he would most likely die. Moreover, Senior Brother Wuya had the spirit of the human race. He did not even take half a step back. This righteousness was exactly the same as Lord Ling Zhao's. However, just as the demonic aura was destroyed, a strand of sword intent suddenly spread out on the battle stage. Subsequently, everyone's eyes trembled as they saw a tall figure quietly standing there. The ancient sword in his hand was shattered, and even his body was pierced with numerous terrifying bloody holes. However, he was still standing, his aura fluctuating. He did not die. Dao Wuya raised his head and looked at Mo Ling calmly. There was a trace of seriousness in his eyes that had never been seen before. Originally, he thought that after 100 years of seclusion, he would not be invincible. However, with his current attainments in the Tao of the Sword, his techniques, and his abilities, he should be invincible among his peers. But now, he realized that he had underestimated the monsters in the world. If Mo Ling were to fight to the death, he would die without a doubt. He actually blocked it. In front of the crowd, a wisp of astonishment also surfaced on the beautiful face of the golden-clothed woman. Clearly, she had not expected that someone at the boundless Tao realm would actually be able to survive from Mo Ling's natal dark feather. One had to know that the Holy Feather Clan was originally a monarch clan of the demon realm. Mo Ling's combat strength was among the top even among the 10 clans. This time, she led 5 people out to test the Realm Lord's palace. Another reason was to help these human forces remember the reputation of the Holy Feather Clan. Who would have thought that a small academy disciple would have such talent? Indeed, there were still some young people in the human race who were worthy of respect. I lost. Mo Ling nodded lightly and looked at Dao Wuya indifferently. With his strength, how could he not see that Dao Wuya was already at the end of his rope? As long as he made a move, he could easily crush this number one of the 4 academies. However, he had just said that as long as Boundless Tao could withstand this attack, he would win this battle. Moreover, in his heart, Mo Ling felt that Dao Wuya was an opponent worthy of respect. Even though the two of them had different standpoints, they had to pay the price of their lives to uphold their Tao hearts. Just this alone was sufficient for Mo Ling to spare his life. This path to immortality had always been lonely and boundless, and it was a form of fortune to be able to have an opponent that could urge each other forward. Hearing this, Dao Wuya frowned but did not say anything. He turned around and walked off the battle platform. However, just as his figure landed below the stage, his feet suddenly trembled. Blood mixed with his internal organs spurted out from his mouth. It was obvious that he had suffered an extremely serious injury. Boundless! Dao Shenji's eyes narrowed slightly. He pulled him into his arms and sped towards the back of the palace. "Haha, Jinli, you go." The golden-robed woman smiled gently, her tone indifferent. She was not surprised that Mo Ling had admitted defeat. After all, with this guy's arrogance, the fact that Dao Wuya was still alive was a humiliation to him. However, the more this was the case, the more he would work hard in his cultivation. This was not considered a loss. Yes. Behind him, a rough-looking and muscular young man stepped out and landed on the battle platform. In an instant, cracks appeared on the battle platform that was completely made of bluestone. It was a ghastly sight. "Human, who dares to fight me?" Jin Li's eyes were as bright as gold and his demonic qi was thick. Though it was not as intimidating as Mo Ling's, it was stronger than Feng Yan's. Currently, all the disciples of the Institute had lost hope. Even the Azure Sky geniuses were scared and did not dare to accept the challenge. Dao Wuya was of the 9th realm of the Exalted Realm, number 1 of the 4 colleges. For the past 100 years, he had been cultivating in isolation at the Heavenly Cave. Even so, he had still lost. Even though Mo Ling admitted defeat, anyone with eyes could tell that Dao Wuya had lost. He had lost completely. As such, how could trash like them fight against these 5 demonic youths? The decline of the humankind was sad and shameful. Shame, anger, and all kinds of complicated emotions surged into their hearts. However, when they thought of Yuan Tianji, Wu Lei, and the others' defeat, the hatred on their faces turned into helplessness. The entire mountain of Dao suddenly became eerily silent. However, just as someone in the crowd sighed softly and was about to take a step forward, an indifferent laughter suddenly sounded from above the void. How dare a few animals act so presumptuously in the sacred place of the humankind? Hearing the voice, everyone was stunned. However, it quickly turned into joy from the bottom of their hearts. Then, everyone looked up at the figure in black that was walking down from the sky. The smile on their faces was bright and sincere. Currently, in the vast sky, a young man in black was walking with his hands behind his back. His face was gentle and his eyes were bright. Under his feet, the divine inscriptions of the great Tao surged and formed a sea that carried his body. Just standing there, He had a terrifying aura that could split mountains and seas and control the world. Even the mysterious golden-clothed woman, when she heard the young man's words, the first thing she felt was not anger. Instead, it was a faint fear, especially the coldness in his eyes. It was like the immortal ice in the deepest part of the 9 heavens' cold stream. It was pure and piercingly cold. The woman in gold frowned slightly. Her delicate body that was originally leaning on the golden chair tensed up unconsciously. Even the few geniuses of the demon race beside her had a serious expression on their faces. "Miss Huang, this person is very strong," one of the young men with a pale face and dark eyes said calmly. There seemed to be ripples flickering in his eyes. It was very mysterious. "Young master. It's Master Ling Xiao. Young master has finally appeared. Ha ha, ha 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 ha, we humans finally don't have to be humiliated by others." Some geniuses of the azure sky cried tears of joy. The anger and unwillingness in their hearts were completely vented at this moment. Originally, everyone thought that Ling Xiao and Gu Chaoxiai were trapped in the illusory wall and would not appear until the Academy Master's lecture. They did not expect that at this moment of life and death for the human race, their young master would descend from the sky on a 7-colored river of stars. A peerless hero. It turned out that there was really a peerless hero in this world. Young master, to strengthen the human race. Young master, unparalleled in the world. Deafening exclamations of shock resounded throughout the entire academy. Compared to when Dao Wu Yi came out of seclusion, the crowd was not shouting at all. Instead, they were shouting with their lives. The suppression just now had already caused them to be on the verge of collapse. In particular, the arrogance and strength of the few young men of the demon race made them feel a kind of fear but did not dare to speak out. Ling Zhao's sudden appearance was like the last crack that broke their emotional defenses. No worries, no fear. With their young master here, why should they be afraid of demons? Lord Ling Xiao, you are the human world now. Chapter 12:29. Lord Ling Xiao. The golden-robed lady raised her eyebrows slightly when she heard what the crowd said. She seemed to be smiling. Even though she had not been in the world for a long time, she had long heard of this name. He was the first young master of the Taigu Ling people in 100,000 years. Just this identity alone was enough to make the Azure world wary. She just did not expect this young man to be so peerless and handsome. Moreover, looking at the Dao runes and divine armaments on him, he could be said to be unique. This was interesting. In essence, the Holy Feather race and the Ling people were not considered enemies. Even though the two races were humans and demons, they both had a common enemy. The World Lord Hall. This force was founded by the immortal race. It controlled the Azure world by force and suppressed the humans and demons. Of course, this kind of hatred could not be reconciled. Ling Xiao. On the battle platform, Jean Li frowned and there was a rare trace of seriousness in his eyes. Judging from the Dao rune galaxy under this young man's feet, he should have some talent in Dao techniques and magical powers. This was a strong enemy. At this moment, Ling Zhao's gaze did not even look at the ferocious-looking Jean Li. Instead, it swept across everyone present and finally paused on Lu Ming and the golden-robed lady for a moment. Especially Lu Ming, who was standing side by side with Li Jichu. His eyes were cold and there was a faint hostility in his gaze. Ling Xiao smiled gently and nodded slightly at Li Jichu, whose face was already red. From the first time he saw this first disciple of the Dao College, he had some guesses. Most likely, there was a child of destiny by this girl's side. Otherwise, the 2,000 providence points on her came out of nowhere. In terms of talent, aptitude, looks, and physique, this Li Jichu could be said to be useless. Although she was slightly stronger than ordinary elites, there was nothing special about her. The only possibility was that she might be related to the Son of Destiny and had been tainted by Providence. True enough. The fifth rank of the Exalt realm required 15,000 providence. However, what made Ling Xiao a little puzzled was that Lu Ming did not have a sacred body or a deity's heart. However, the aura on his body was quite strange. It was holy and gloomy at the same time, and it was evil at the same time. Could it be that his Goldfinger had something to do with his cultivation method? Ling Xiao narrowed his eyes, but there was no change in his expression. He turned to look at the 5 demon clan youths in front of the crowd. Among the 5 of them, none of them had the mandate of heaven. Only the golden-clothed woman had some luck, but it was not worth mentioning. The reason why Ling Xiao showed up now was not to show off. At such a critical moment for the human race, how could the young master just sit by and watch these demons behave so arrogantly? Moreover, if Ling Xiao still did not appear, the few destined leaks present would probably not be able to suppress their desire to show off. At the very least, Yang Yuan and Lu Ming were very good at counterattacking, slapping faces, and upholding justice for the human race. However, there was a risk in this martial arts competition. If you were injured, who knew if it would affect the following plan? I, Ling Xiao, the light of the righteous path, the reigning human emperor, vowed to protect the human race behind my back and slay the demons under my feet. It was my duty to do so. What? You call this showing off? No, this is called showing off in front of the masses. Who gave you the courage to come to the sacred land of the human race and be so presumptuous? Ling Xiao stood proudly in front of everyone with his hands behind his back. There seemed to be endless immortal light lingering around him. He was full of righteousness and intimidating. Especially that black robe, it was untainted by the wind and looked otherworldly and elegant. Inexplicably, the anxiety and panic in everyone's hearts dissipated in an instant. At this moment, they could only hope that the young master would wield his sword and kill all the demons in a peerless manner. Of course, if the young master was defeated today, this immortal path would come to an end. Since you're on the stage, you'll be representing the human race in this battle? The moment Ling Xiao finished speaking, Jean Li's eyes suddenly flashed with a sinister and ferocious glint. In fact, before he could finish his words, he suddenly turned into an afterimage and dove down from the sky. His outstretched palms turned into 2 eagle claws out of thin air. They surged with golden brilliance, splitting the sky and crushing the earth. Oh no! This demon is simply shameless. How dare he sneak attack the young master? Instantly, all the human disciples were filled with righteous indignation and anger. Ling Xiao, on the other hand, only looked up indifferently and glanced at the falling figure. A hint of coldness seemed to appear in his eyes. Now it seemed that this demon's provocation was related to the prestige of the human race. What he wanted to do was to establish a new backbone of the human race in front of everyone. How could a mere 6 honorable realm demons with no luck be compared to him, no matter how terrifying their bloodlines were? Buzz. Just as everyone was furious and cursing, Ling Xiao suddenly stretched out a palm on the stage and collided with one of Jean Li's golden eagle claws. Boom! Boom! A vast aura surged for thousands of miles, rippling thousands of ripples. At this moment, everyone felt as if space had frozen for a moment. Then, the mountain forest hall in the distance collapsed with a loud bang. How is this possible? Jean Li was in midair, his heart palpitating. However, at this moment, he did not seem to feel a trace of pain at all, only endless fear and shock. The great golden eagle was the most famous overlord of the demon race. The innate ability of this race was a pair of powerful claws. It was rumored that the powerhouses of the great golden eagle race could tear apart all enemies with their claws. In fact, they could easily grab prey that was 10,000 times heavier than them. However, he did not move at all. A human youth actually withstood the power of his golden claws with just one hand. How ridiculous! How is this possible? At this moment, the golden-clothed woman and the others also revealed a trace of surprise. Naturally, they knew Jean Li's methods very well. His golden claws were difficult for even a saint to resist head-on. This young master of the Ling people was indeed not simple. I don't believe that a human like you. Jean Li gritted his teeth and clenched his golden claws. His body was dazzling with golden light. Vaguely, the shadow of a divine eagle appeared in the sky and cried out to the heavens. Chirp! However, at this moment, the crisp sound of bones breaking quietly rang out. Everyone was stunned when they saw the shadow of the great golden eagle that was about to take off suddenly freeze in mid-air. Jean Li lowered his head and looked at his golden claws that were held in Ling Zhao's hand. His eyes rippled, and for the first time, he saw despair in them. No! Crack! Ling Zhao casually clenched his fist and crushed the claw. Then, without giving Jean Li any time to react, he gently pulled him down from the sky. The moment Jean Li's figure fell, Ling Zhao suddenly stepped out and kicked his chest, causing him to fall toward the woman in golden robes. Buzz! The sound of wind suddenly rang out, and the eyes of the woman in golden robes finally turned completely cold at this moment. Chapter 12:30. This is the consequence of provoking the human race. Ling Zhao stood with his hands behind his back, his black robe fluttering in the wind. At that moment, his tone was extremely calm, and there were no ripples on his face. However, as he stood there, he gave off a feeling of superiority, as if he was looking down on all living things. Young Master is mighty! Young Master! Unparalleled! The crowd began to cheer, and the excitement reached its peak. Some of the prides of the various clans even had the shape of love in their eyes. At this moment, in the eyes of the crowd, Ling Zhao was no longer the supreme power of the heavens, but the backbone of the human race. Young Master of the Ling people? Unparalleled celestial beauty? None of that was important. Yes, none of that was important. He was the backbone of the human race. He stood proudly in the human world. If he did not fall, it was the fate of the human race. If he fell, it would be the sacred teaching of the human race. It would be passed down through the ages. That was probably the case for the human saint. Kissing a young master's mouth, and being a young master. Suddenly, the path to immortality became dull. Buzz! The golden-robed lady stretched out her hand and soared into the sky. She flipped in the air and removed the force from Jean Li's body. Even so, her body trembled inexplicably for an instant. Her beautiful eyes were filled with shock. She lowered her head to look at Jean Li, who had already fainted from his severe injuries. Her beautiful face froze slightly. Although Jean Li was still alive, his aura was weak. Even if he survived, he would most likely be crippled. The reason he was still alive was probably not because of the kindness of the young master of the Ling people. On the contrary, it was more like he wanted to kill someone and intimidate the demon race. Young mistress, let me go. Mo Ling's face was gloomy. Especially at this moment, Ling Zhao's domineering attitude had aroused the true ferocity in his heart. Only the strong deserved to be called an enemy. On the contrary, he was not even interested in asking for the names of those who had been defeated by him. Yes. The golden-robed lady casually threw Jean Li to Feng Yan beside her and nodded slightly. At this moment, there seemed to be golden flames dancing in her eyes. The demonic aura around her surged into a mist. It was extremely mysterious. All of you together. However, looking at Mo Ling, who was flying over from the sky, Ling Zhao's face did not change at all. Instead, he spoke in a calm tone. While what? When they heard this, it wasn't just Mo Ling, even the golden-clothed woman and all the other students of the academy revealed a wisp of shock and blankness. Let's go together? Young master, do you mean to ask these young monsters to attack together? He wanted to fight 6 demons alone? Oh, now it was the 5 demons. After all, Jean Li didn't look like he was going to survive. Domineering! How arrogant! However, at this moment, not only did the crowd not feel a trace of disdain or disbelief, their expressions became even more excited. Did you see that? This is the backbone of the human race, the destiny, the strength of character, the light of righteousness. What demonic prodigy! I can kill you with a wave of my hand. Master Ling Xiao, perhaps you don't know who we are, so. Mo Ling stood at the top of the sky with a gloomy expression. At this moment, demonic aura had already spread across thousands of miles around him. Death flames were burning around him, trying to show Ling Xiao how powerful he was. However, at this moment, Ling Xiao only shook his head indifferently with a weary expression. The human race is not a cruel and bloodthirsty race. However, if someone views this gentleness as cowardice, then, today, I will use my mortal body to witness the human race's Saint Tao. The mountain wind stopped blowing and everything was silent. At this moment, everyone was looking at the black-clothed figure standing on the stage with his hands clasped behind his back. Their eyes were filled with smiles. However, this kind of smile was filled with sorrow, and even bitterness. How many years had it been? Ever since the Realm Lord Palace suppressed the world and took control of the human race, although the human race was not expelled to the four extremities like the demon race, the feeling of being dominated by others had long been ingrained in their bones. In the eyes of the people, the Realm Lord was the god of this world. He could not be offended and could not be overthrown. After all, 100,000 years ago, even though the human race had countless talents, they were still suppressed and killed by this immortal race member. Since then, they had been depressed. However, today, everyone saw the light from this young master of the Ling people. An extreme and pure light of hope. His originally cold and thin bloodline suddenly showed signs of boiling. What was there to fear even the heavens? I will use my mortal body to stand in the world and go against the gods and kill the immortals. The entire Tao Mountain was silent. Even the three hall masters had shocked expressions on their faces. In the past 100,000 years of inheritance, countless people had left their names in the academy. Even some ancient emperors and immortal sect sages had been listed on the ancient Tao Heaven tablet. However, compared to this young man in front of them, they were not worth mentioning. Not only was his talent and combat strength not worth mentioning, but even his appearance and temperament were not worth mentioning. He looked domineering, but in reality, what he was carrying was not just one person's reputation. He was fighting for the entire human race. Regardless of whether he won or lost this battle, his aura alone was enough to frighten thousands of races. He was upholding the great wish of the human race. With such a young man in the human race, what was there to fear from the sky demon and the immortal race? Ling people's young master is indeed righteous and loyal. However, the demon race is not the type to bully others. Since the young master wants to fight, I, Mo Ling, will accompany the young master. Mo Ling's eyes trembled, and the battle intent in his eyes surged. Afterward, before everyone could recover from their shock, they saw a shocking demonic aura surging around him. The ink-colored mandarin shadow appeared in the sky once again, emitting an insufferably brilliant glow. Hundreds of thousands of feathers descended from the sky. "Young master, be careful!" Seeing this, everyone's expression changed drastically. The shock in their eyes instantly turned into endless worry. That was right. The young master was very powerful, but Mo Ling's attack was something that even Dao Huia, who was at the 9th stage exalted realm, could not block. Could the young master really bring about a new miracle to the human race? Young master, at the side of the battle platform, Li Jichu clenched her jade-like hands tightly, looking sad. Never in her wildest dreams did she expect that this grand event in Qingtsang would turn out like this. Even though she had an instinctive trust in Ling Xiao, she could not help but feel a little scared at the thought of senior brother Huia being seriously injured. She was afraid that the young master would be defeated and injured. What she was more afraid of was that her faith would collapse. Ling Xiao. Beside her, Lu Ming's eyes were calm, and there was a touch of vicissitudes on his face that did not match his age. Mo Ling was very powerful. He was so powerful that he was almost invincible in the exalted realm. However, Lu Ming was fearless in his heart because he had not really used his trump card. Given his physical strength, there was no way he could block Mo Ling's hundreds of thousands of feather swords. However, he would not give this demon a chance to make a move. If not for Ling Xiao's sudden appearance just now, the one standing on the battle platform now would be him. Senior brother Wu Yao was seriously injured and defeated. This was the best opportunity for him to become the number one in the 4 courtyards. The feeling of being stuck halfway in the act was really a little uncomfortable. Ling Xiao, I hope that your strength is worthy of your arrogance. Otherwise, all of you are ultimately just stepping stones for me to reach the pinnacle of the world. Buzz! Just as everyone was looking at the endless feathers in horror, there was suddenly an ear-piercing buzzing sound on the battle platform. At this moment, Ling Xiao put one hand behind his back and stretched out the other. He stretched out 2 fingers and gently waved them toward the sky. Boom! Chapter 12:31. Buzz! The sound of swords rang and heaven and earth split apart. Ling Xiao's body was surrounded by a clear radiance. His celestial aura was flourishing. His face was still as calm as ever. However, the 2 fingers he extended were like divine swords that were showing off their sharpness. The 500 swords shone at the same time, making his body look taller and more majestic. There was an aura that could penetrate one's heart. It made one feel depressed but also expectant. Ah! Young master, you are the bright sun that hangs over all living beings. Brilliant, outstanding, and unparalleled. Whoosh! The feathers pierced through the air with great sharpness and covered heaven and earth. However, Ling Xiao waved his hand casually. A sword radiance that was tens of thousands of feet long appeared in the void. It swept across all directions with an invincible aura and shattered everything. The 100,000 feather swords shattered in front of everyone's shocked eyes. They did not even move a corner of the sword aura. How is this possible? Mo Ling stood in the void, his body and mind trembling. He could feel the supreme Taoist rhyme contained in the sword aura. Just a wisp of it was enough to destroy the heavens and reach the pinnacle of swordsmanship. When did a new sword immortal appear in Qingtsang? Before Mo Ling could be shocked, he saw the sword aura rise up and furiously slash at him with a momentum that could split open the sky. Oh no! Mo Ling's face trembled. His eyes were filled with horror. Demonic aura gathered outside his body, and he disappeared into thin air. However, before he could relax, the sword aura seemed to have sensed his aura. It suddenly changed its direction and swept toward him. Damn it! At this moment, Mo Ling felt his body and mind turn cold. He had no choice but to use his original body to resist the supreme sword aura. Chirp! Demonic aura swept across the sky. A black mandarin bird floated in the sky above Dao Mountain. It flapped its wings and was about to fly away. At this moment, the sword aura suddenly fell from the sky and slashed his wings. Chirp! A painful roar immediately resounded through heaven and earth. Large patches of blood rain fell from the sky and drowned the fighting stage in an instant. Mo Ling's body fell from the sky and crashed to the ground. He did not get up for a long time. The entire Dao Mountain fell into a strange silence once again. Everyone looked at the black-clothed figure standing on the platform. They saw that there seemed to be divine light shining around him. It was as brilliant as the sun and as imposing as an immortal. Too powerful. Lord Ling Xiao is simply too powerful. This is what it means to be truly invincible, right? Only after a long while did the surrounding people recover from their shock. Their eyes were filled with reverence as they looked at Ling Xiao. This was especially true for the disciples of the 4 academies. At this moment, their hearts were trembling, and they didn't know how to react. Boundless Dao's strength was beyond doubt. He was the #1 student of the 4 academies, and his talent was extraordinary. Even the Lord of Dao Heaven Manor praised him greatly. However, even senior brother Wu Yao was heavily injured and unconscious by Mo Ling's attacks, and his fate was unknown. On the other hand, Lord Ling Xiao merely stretched out 2 fingers and waved them lightly. Mo Ling actually let out a sharp cry and fell from the sky. What was invincible? This was true invincibility. Everyone else was just bragging. What kind of monsters dared to be arrogant in front of the young master and insult the humankind? Only death awaited them. Make your move. The lady in gold frowned and looked at Ling Xiao strangely. She waved her hand, and behind her, 3 silhouettes dashed out and pounced on Ling Xiao. However, she didn't dare to make a move. Her eyes were dark as if she was deep in thought. Buzz. Vast amounts of demonic chi swept across the sky. The 3 heavens' favorites' joint attack was shocking. Around the 3 of them, demonic markings formed. 3 different types of demonic beasts leaped into the sky and blocked out the sun. Heaven and earth turned upside down and the universe reversed. Countless feathers condensed into the green heavens. They were like streaks of divine blades, piercing through space and scattering down. Seeing this, Ling Xiao's face did not reveal a trace of panic. Wherever his gaze passed, thousands of Daos were destroyed. Around him, countless strange phenomena began to rise. The heavenly sun rose from the east, and purple clouds filled the sky. Ancient trees, galaxies, and mountains appeared one after another. Like the beginning of a new era, they contained an indescribable chaos. The stars exploded, and the sky collapsed. At this moment, Ling Xiao was like a god who destroyed the world, or a Buddha who created the world. With a single thought, he could reopen the world. The attacks of the 3 demon clan prodigies dissipated the moment they came into contact with the various divine elephants. Boom! A torrential aura erupted. Even with the strength of their physical bodies, their expressions changed greatly at this moment, and they were almost killed by this imposing aura, causing them to retreat one after another while terror could be seen in their eyes. From beginning to end, Ling Xiao remained standing on the battle platform with his hands behind his back. His face was calm and emotionless. Too strong. The 3 heavens' favorites looked at each other and saw the fear in each other's eyes. With their capabilities, even if they fought against the 100 talents of the humankind, they would be able to crush them. However, the 3 of them were unable to break through the strange phenomenon before the young master of the Ling people. What kind of heavenly talent was this? He was simply inhuman. It was him. A god from the 9 heavens had descended to the mortal world. Kill. However, this battle was no longer just a dispute between the 3 of them. It was a battle that concerned the reputation of the demon kind and the human kind. Therefore, there was no way out for them. If the 3 of them were defeated by the young master of the Ling people today, the demon kind would be suppressed by the human kind. One had to know that although Ling Xiao's background was supreme, he was not in the sequence. Although the 6 of them could not be considered the best of the demon kind, they were the ones who stood at the top. Buzz! With that thought in mind, another wave of demonic light erupted from the 3 of them. It was as if 3 huge stars had bloomed in the sky. Then, the 3 of them struck out with their palms. The demonic force turned into a sea like the Nether River and smashed towards Ling Xiao. At the same time, Mo Ling, whose arm had been cut off by Ling Xiao, got up from the ground with difficulty and watched the battle with a pale face. In the next moment, he took a step forward and pushed out with one palm. There seemed to be dark flames rolling in his palm that could burn everything. As if he had sensed the movement behind him, Ling Xiao's eyes were clear. He did not panic at all and directly punched out. Relying on the strength of his physical body, he collided with Mo Ling's. Boom! The moment their palms collided, Mo Ling's expression changed drastically. Although he had already seen how strong Ling Zhao's physical body was, he only understood that this kind of strength was beyond the scope of the honorable realm when they actually clashed. As for his only remaining arm, it was also shattered by Ling Zhao's fist shadows. Even his bones and flesh were crushed to pieces. Mo Ling's figure flew out. Although there was a hint of pain on his face, there was more of a gloomy feeling of success. The demon kind had always been decisive and unscrupulous in killing. In their eyes, only the winner was king. The weak were prey to the strong. As for the principles and rules, they had to fill their stomachs first. Therefore, compared to the geniuses of the humankind, their attacks were more unscrupulous and had no bottom line. At this moment, Mo Ling had attacked to attract Ling Zhao's attention and distract him so that the other three would have an opportunity. Now, it seemed that he had achieved his goal. 3 demonic chi seals descended from the sky and enveloped Ling Zhao's figure and the entire battle platform. In just an instant, the battle platform shattered and the heavenly Tao no longer existed. A cloud of dust rose up, obscuring everyone's vision. Chapter 1232. Lord Ling Xiao! Young Master! Cries of surprise could be heard all over Dao Mountain. Everyone stared at the figure that was drowned in the demonic light with resentment in their eyes. Xianyuan Weiyang, Yaoguang, and the others frowned. Their bodies were surrounded by a faint spiritual light, and they were ready to attack. Amitba, Yaoguang in particular, only felt grief and hatred in his heart. An indescribable killing intent rose in him, and even the red lotus between his eyebrows seemed to emit a dense blood-red light. Despicable! The demons are despicable and shameless! Countless prodigies from the various clans looked resentful. Clearly, they despised Mo Ling's actions. Only a few people who truly stood at the peak of the current generation looked coldly at the situation in the field and did not say anything. On the path to immortality, everyone competed. Not to mention that Mo Ling was still on the battle stage, so it could not be considered a sneak attack. Moreover, this was the Daotian Academy. It was a battle stage competition, and there were naturally rules. However, if one left this place and changed to any mystic realm or barren mountain, such sneak attacks could be seen everywhere. Every step in the battle for creation was dangerous. It was not just a saying. The only difference was that some people killed people openly, crushing the heavens with their strength, and forging the path to immortality with the blood and bones of tens of thousands of spirits. Some people were good at scheming, controlling people's hearts, and ruling the world with their schemes, hiding behind the world. Of these 2 types of people, one was called the Heavenly Mandate. Everything they said and did was reasonable. The second type had to bear the crime of being sinister and cunning, and everyone could kill them. Buzz! However, just as everyone was filled with righteous indignation and cursing, a wave of energy suddenly swept through the area where the demonic light shone. Then, tens of thousands of lightning bolts shot into the sky and suppressed the world. A fair and slender hand suddenly tore through the demonic clouds and reached out. The black-robed figure finally appeared in everyone's sight. Ling Xiao was not injured at all. Even his aura was vast and boundless, without the slightest hint of exhaustion. His hair was tied up and his black robe was spotless. It was as if the 3 demon prodigies' methods had not touched him at all. Gulp! The 3 of them were stunned. They felt their hair stand on end, as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. Even the golden-clothed girl below the battle stage had a solemn expression on her face. However, unlike the other 3, there was still a trace of hesitation in her eyes, as if she was secretly brewing something. I don't believe it. There's no way the 3 of us can't deal with a single human youth. Feng Yen roared angrily and was the first to rush out. Green feathers covered his entire body, and every inch of them seemed to have traces of wind flowing around them. They were extremely fast. Looking at the green light that flashed in front of him, Ling Zhao's eyes suddenly transformed with Tao patterns. Immediately after, Feng Yen, who was flying with the wind, suddenly felt the air around him become stifled. Even his figure seemed to be imprisoned by an invisible force. Before he could react, he saw Ling Xiao stretch out his palm and push it horizontally. Lightning radiance bloomed in the center of his palm. Silver-white patterns flowed with will of the way, looking extremely violent. Oh no! Feng Yan's expression changed drastically. He forcefully moved his body, but Ling Xiao's palm still landed on his left shoulder, instantly shattering half of his body. At this time, the remaining two demon youths no longer dared to hesitate. As they took a step forward, they directly revealed their true forms and rushed towards Ling Xiao. Boom! The sky shook and spiritual power surged like a tide. On the Dao Mountain, a demonic wind suddenly blew. It was bone-chilling, especially the two demon shadows that were hundreds of feet long. They were like ancient birds descending from the sky, carrying a terrifying aura that could crush everything. They flapped their wings and hissed. Ling Xiao's body could be said to be insignificant in front of them, but he did not retreat a single step. Young master, countless prodigies clenched their fists tightly, feeling inexplicably nervous. The trump cards of these demon race experts were mostly their body obijna. It was obvious that these two demons were planning to fight with their lives. A mere beast dares to be so fierce in front of others. Ling Xiao raised his head and looked at the two demon shadows that were pouncing from the sky. Coldness shot out from his eyes. A silver-white ancient sword suddenly appeared in his hand. It seemed to be surging with Dao intent, and the sword intent formed a C. Buzz. Then, he raised his hand and slashed towards the two demons. 7 colored light suddenly condensed into a sharp blade like the 9 heavens, carrying with it tens of thousands of daos that almost annihilated the sky. This sword intent was simply too vast. It was like the long river of time, cutting through eternity and shattering reincarnation. At this time, the 3 hall masters felt a chill rise from the soles of their feet. Their minds were shocked, and they could not bear the power of this sword. After this battle, there should be 8 sword immortals in the Azure world, 3 of them in the world. The remaining Exalt Realm disciples were silent like cicadas in the winter. They were actually terrified by that strand of sword chi, and they were unable to struggle at all. Sigh. At the critical moment, a ray of light suddenly lit up below the battle stage. On the other hand, the golden-clothed woman who hadn't made a move all this while suddenly soared into the air. Her figure transformed into a graceful swan as she blocked the 7-colored sword intent. In her hand, a black feather floated in the air. It burned with flames and turned into a sea of darkness. It enveloped the two demons and collided with the sword intent. The Dao buzzed, and the supreme chi recovered instantly. The originally clear sky darkened in an instant. As if the end of the world had arrived, the sky collapsed and reassembled, revealing endless desolation. Ling Xiao's sword intent could not break through the feather in the end and dissipated slowly. Even so, blood still dripped from the corner of the woman in gold's mouth. The aura around her was slightly weakened. However, at this time, there was no trace of annoyance on her face. Instead, she looked at the young man in front of her playfully. The powerhouses of the various academies looked at each other. At this time, they were not only shocked by Ling Xiao's sword intent, but also the black feather that was floating in the air. From this feather, they could sense an indescribably terrifying emperor aura. It covered the chi of all spirits and obliterated the creation of the great Tao. In an instant, everyone seemed to have thought of something. Their eyes trembled, and their Tao hearts fluctuated. Perhaps these few people from the demon clan had relied on this feather to silently descend to the peak of Dao Mountain. To be able to block the prying of the Sage Realm, and even the supreme powerhouses of the Academy, who had not appeared for a long time, did not notice any clues. It was obvious that the origin of this feather was not simple. The immortal demon emperor. Could it be that this overlord of the demon clan, who was suppressed by the realm lord 100,000 years ago, really did not die and had reappeared in the world? Suddenly, the three sect leaders' faces turned cold, and their souls trembled. "You are very powerful." Above the void, the woman in gold smiled faintly. Her pale face was full of flirtatious and seductive. "We've lost this battle." And then, Ling Xiao held his sword and looked indifferent. At this time, he was not in a hurry to kill these demons. After all, a group of demon clan geniuses without fate was not worth wasting his energy. Everything that happened today was for the sake of the human clan's reputation and to hide the secret of his demonic body. Now, it seemed that he had achieved his goal. The life and death of these demon clan members were in his hands now. To kill or not to kill, it depended on whether they were valuable or not. Chapter 1233. Master Ling Xiao, are you interested in cooperating with me? The golden-robed lady transmitted her voice through her divine soul. Her golden eyes were bright and contained endless divinity. With Ling Xiao's talent, he would definitely reach the top of the Azure continent in less than 100 years. As for his identity, he was born to oppose the Realm Lord Palace. However, the Realm Lord Palace's power had been deeply rooted in the Azure continent for 100,000 years. It was impossible to destroy and replace it in a short period of time. Furthermore, according to the estimations of the demon race, the Realm Lord's talent was unprecedented. It was impossible for such a person to die so easily. Now that he had suddenly disappeared, it was more like he had withdrawn from the world and was hiding behind the scenes to plot for a bigger world. To find him and kill him, even if the Divine Feather race had the power of the top 10 demon races in the extreme south, they would not be able to do it and repeat the same mistake. The Divine Feather race needed a helper. The Ling people had been silent for 100,000 years. Now that Ling Xiao had appeared, it was definitely not a coincidence. As long as the two races worked together, they would be able to split the world again. As for whether the demon race would regain control of the order and rule the Azure continent or the Ling people would suppress the other races and become supreme, that would have to wait until the Realm Lord Palace was destroyed. Of course, if Ling Xiao was defeated today, the Divine Feather race would not have such thoughts. After all, a piece of trash was not qualified to fight for the world. Cooperate. Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows and a playful smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. I don't even know who you are and you want to cooperate with me? Aren't you afraid that I will leave all of you here? I am Huang Luoi, the current young master of the Divine Feather race. The golden-robed lady smiled charmingly. Her hair was sparkling and there were traces of dancing flames on it. Divine Feather race? Ling Xiao nodded indifferently. He had already guessed the background of this lady and the demon race youths in front of him. Looking at the extreme south, almost all the birds with terrifying bloodlines were in the Divine Feather race. It seems that the one from the Divine Feather race has awakened. Since the Sovereign Lord is said to be immortal, he naturally won't die so easily. This feather is a token of my Divine Feather race. If young master has thought it through, you can come to the extreme south to find me at any time. Huang Luo waved her jade-like hand and a golden feather turned into a flowing light as it flew into Ling Xiao's hand. Her figure soared into the sky with the 5 demonic clan youths and headed towards the distant mountains. Seeing this, the playfulness in Ling Xiao's eyes deepened. He played with the golden feather in his palm. Especially the lingering warmth on it, it made one's imagination run wild. Now in the azure firmament the world was in chaos. Regardless of whether the demon emperor had awakened or not, he would not be a threat to him for the time being. However, if Ling Xiao wanted to find the whereabouts of the Realm Master, with the secret help of the Divine Feather Clan, it would naturally be twice the result with half the effort. No one would refuse such a good fortune that was delivered to their hands. Moreover, Huang Luoi did not have much luck on him. In that case, there were not many variables. She wanted to make use of Ling Xiao and she did not hide it. She must have something to rely on. However, this young Master Divine Feather would never have thought that the person she was facing was not an ancient clan young master, but the real taboo of the 9 heavens and 10 lands. Let's go. It was only after Huang Luoi and the rest had disappeared into the distance that the countless heavenly talents around the battle stage recovered from their shock. When they lowered their heads again, they saw the black-robed figure walking towards them. His footsteps were calm and his immortal face was gentle. He was the only one in the world, even if everyone knew that Lord Ling Xiao was invincible. However, today they had a deeper understanding of what the word invincible meant. Under the revered realm, no matter how many enemies there were, no matter how talented they would kill indiscriminately. If it wasn't for the fact that Huang Luoi had displayed that strange black feather at the final juncture, just that strike alone would have caused those 2 beasts to lose their lives on the spot. 1 against 5, crushing all the demon clan's heavenly talents. What else was there to say? Lord Ling Xiao, you are the righteous path of the human world. You are divine. Even Yuan Tianji and the others no longer had the slightest bit of fighting spirit in their eyes. There was only endless gloominess. Compared to young Master Ling Xiao, they could not be said to be completely useless. They were simply trash. Therefore, there was no need to look up to a mountain peak when you were young because it would only make you lose all your fighting spirit. Climbing was a path under one's feet and not a magnificent view at the end of one's vision. Mutual encouragement. Young Master. Xianyuan Weiyang ran over from afar. He was 1 step ahead of Li Jichu and stood beside Ling Xiao. At this moment, there was still some worry on her face. Her lips were slightly pouted and she looked innocent. Young Master, how are you? Are you hurt? What did that demonic woman give you just now? She seemed to be very respectful to you. It's nothing. Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. His gaze was indifferent. On the fighting platform behind him, Hong Guji stepped forward and stood in front of the crowd. He said loudly, although the process of this martial arts competition of the 4 academies was complicated, it has ended successfully. I hereby announce that Lu Ming from the Confucian Institute is the champion of the martial arts competition. He can head to the Sutra Depository to choose a cultivation technique for cultivation. In the next few days, all of you can stay at Dao Mountain to cultivate. Hong Guji took out a golden token from his Qian Kuan ring and passed it to Lu Ming beside him. This token symbolized the status of the champion of the 4 academies. It was the highest honor of the younger generation. Senior sister, do you see this? Today, I am already standing at the top of the 4 academies. Lu Ming had a gentle smile on his face. He could not wait to look at the crowd. He wanted to be the first to see the gratification and joy on Li Jichu's face. But, just as he took the token and turned his head, the expression on his face suddenly froze. At this moment, he saw that no one in the crowd below the fighting platform was paying attention to his presence. Everyone's gaze was fixed on the black-clothed figure that stood out from the dust. Even Li Jichu accompanied the young man as they walked toward the distant mountain. Suddenly, Lu Ming felt an inexplicable pressure in his heart. It was as if there was a ball of fire burning his Tao heart and soul. This feeling of being ignored and alienated by someone close to him was very uncomfortable. What was the point of being the champion of the 4 academies? Ling Xiao, at the same time, there was a figure standing in the crowd, looking coldly at the few figures who were walking away. At this moment, Zhang Juji's eyes were filled with endless fighting spirit. To be honest, he did not have much enmity toward Ling Xiao. Although this young man was greedy for fame, after all, it was not him who had caused him to end up in his current situation. It was Hua Mingxi. It was even possible that Ling Xiao had been schemed against by his shrewd second senior sister. However, he had to admit that his strength was really terrifying and oppressive. He was like a tall mountain, standing at the top of the sky, Unreachable! Ling Xiao, sooner or later, I will defeat you in front of everyone and take back everything that belongs to me. In the end, Zhang Juji took a deep breath and turned to walk in the opposite direction. Initially, he was still worried that he would meet Dao Wuya, who was in seclusion in the Saint Peak Immortal Cave where the creation was hidden. He did not expect that the champion of the 4 academies would come out of seclusion in a hurry and be crippled by Mo Ling. What was there to say? The creation was on his side. Chapter 1234. Young Master, this way please. The quiet mountain road was full of twists and turns. On both sides of the road, immortal flowers and exotic herbs bloomed slowly, their fragrance filling the air. At this moment, Li Jichu was accompanying Ling Xiao as they walked toward the Great Yang Peak where the Confucian Institute was located. Initially, all the Azure elites were arranged to rest in the Hanlin Academy during the Academy Master's lecture. However, was Young Master an Azure elite? Young Master had the strength of a human. Therefore, Li Jichu had arranged a courtyard early in the morning to wait for Young Master's arrival. Senior Sisterly, thank you for your trouble. Ling Xiao smiled faintly. However, he was already thinking about how to harvest Lu Ming on the spot in the Daotian Academy. When the young man looked at Li Jichu just now, it was obvious that there was a hint of emotional entanglement in his eyes. Obviously, if not for Ling Xiao's appearance, this Lady of Providence would most likely be his destined marriage. Of course, Ling Xiao had no interest in Li Jichu at all. She was merely a chess piece used to conceal his identity and probe for information. However, Ling Xiao was very interested in Lu Ming. In particular, this kind of son of Providence who did not have a sacred body or sacred blood always had some real treasures in his hands. Once a mortal grew up, be it in terms of temperament or means, they would be truly terrifying. Young Master, what are you talking about? Didn't we agree that as long as you come to the Daotian Academy, Jichu will bring you around? Li Jichu's eyes trembled, her face full of smiles. However, at this moment, Yaoguang and Xianyuan Weiyang were still by the side. She did not dare to be too direct. Haha, it's a pity that I didn't get to watch the martial arts competition between the 4 academies. I wonder which academy is the first place of the 4 academies this time? Speaking of which, when I was born, I fought side by side with senior brother Wunren of the Puppet Institute and fought against the Sky Demon. Unfortunately, sigh, so much time has passed in the blink of an eye. Ling Xiao sighed softly, and there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. To attain the Tao in the morning, one can die in the evening. Senior brother Wunren can be considered a deceased person that I respect more in my heart. Yes, senior brother Wunren's personality is very good. He has always been very caring towards his junior brothers and sisters in the 4 campuses. However, the first place of the 4 campuses this time is from our Confucian institution. Li Jichu pursed her lips and smiled. His name is Lu Ming. He is my junior brother. Oh? So, you're a disciple of the Confucian institution. If you have time, Senior Sisterly, please introduce me to you. You should know that I like to make friends, especially righteous Tao geniuses. Good. Young Master, we're here. Li Jichu gently nodded and led Ling Xiao and the other 3 out of the ancient forest to a secluded valley. This valley is where I usually cultivate in seclusion. Young Master, please bear with it for a while. This is a good place. Ling Xiao's eyes were filled with amazement. In particular, the Tao runes that lingered around this place were even more spirited and beautiful. The divine tree took root, the immortal flowers bloomed, and there were colorful rays of light splashing in the mountain breeze. The birds chirped and the flowers were fragrant, and the breeze was gentle. One could tell that Li Jichu had put in a lot of effort in decorating this valley. It's good that you don't mind. Young Master, are you tired? If you're not tired, shall I bring you around? Li Jichu stole a glance at Yaoguang and the rest, and her pretty face blushed. Ling Xiao, on the other hand, smiled and nodded. Just nice. I also want to take a good look at this sacred place of the human race, the divine scenery of the Academy. Previously, Inu had used her soul voice transmission to say that Zhang Jiuji had already found out about this forbidden area of the Academy. It was very likely that the Fiend Bone was on the Saint Peak where the Tao Heaven Prefecture Master was cultivating in seclusion. However, these things had yet to be verified. With Li Zhichu, the first disciple of the Confucian Institute, personally leading the way, it would naturally save them a lot of trouble. Moreover, Ling Xiao still had some doubts in his heart at this moment. Who exactly was that young man named Jun Hanch? He seemed to know about his existence, but he did not know about the secret of the Sky Demon. With his strength, as long as he entered the world, how could there be no rumors about him in the world? It was as if he had only appeared on the Tao Heaven stele and left a soul shadow to wait for Ling Xiao to appear. Then, he disappeared into thin air. According to Ling Xiao's speculation, this person was very likely not from this era. However, Ling Xiao had only been in the upper world for a few months, and he had never seen a young man with such terrifying combat strength. Who exactly was he? Young master, let me show you around the Confucian Institute. Li Zhichu's expression lit up. She immediately led Ling Xiao to the main hall in the distance, leaving Yao Guang and the other two girls in the valley. Along the way, the two of them talked about many interesting things about the martial arts competition of the 4 academies. From Li Zhichu's words, Ling Xiao could tell that Lu Ming was extraordinary. His combat strength was extremely terrifying. Even if he were to fight against a 7th-grade venerable, he would be able to defeat him easily. It was not surprising that a person of destiny could kill someone of a higher level. However, Lu Ming's methods were strange. Even the disciples of the academy who fought with him could sense that there were many mysterious auras on his body. It was not just the righteous aura of the Confucian Institute. Moreover, most importantly, the puppet armor condensed by Wu Daji, a disciple of the Puppet Institute, was broken by Lu Ming with a single slash. It was shocking. In that case, Ling Xiao thought of a model, a heaven-defying sun with unparalleled divine weapon, able to break through all enemies. Interesting. Senior Sister Li, when I looked at the Tao Heaven Ancient Tablet the other day, there was a name on it that dominated the Azure continent. His name is Jun Hanch. Do you know his background? The green mountain path was shrouded in fog. Ling Xiao walked with his hands behind his back. His black robe fluttered in the wind. His expression was natural and gentle. Upon hearing that, Li Zhichu was slightly stunned. She then shook her head. I know this name, but I don't know his background. He ranked first on the ancient tablet and had unparalleled talent. I once heard from my master that this person seemed to have left his name on the Tao tablet and the Wall of Illusions before he left the mountain. Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. There were thousands of soul patterns in his eyes. Some intuition in his heart became clearer. When did he come to the academy? Everyone knew that the Tao Heaven Academy Master's Scripture Lecture was a grand event held once every 100 years in the Azure continent. Everyone who came to the academy was here for the Academy Master. Since Jun Hanch had reached the top of the Tao tablet, why would he give up on this opportunity? Unless he just left his soul consciousness here to wait for Ling Xiao to appear. However, how did he know that Ling Xiao would definitely come? I don't know. After all, the disciples of the academy don't participate in the 3 great trials. Li Zhichu shook her head blankly. Then, she smiled brightly. But now, you are the number 1 in the human race. Your talent is everlasting. Jun Hanch is already a thing of the past. Haha, Senior Sister Li, I heard that there is a Saint Mountain in the academy. It is the place where the academy master lives in seclusion. It is filled with celestial aura. I wonder if I have the chance to bathe in the celestial aura given my identity. Ling Xiao nodded slightly and did not ask further. Now, it seemed that June Hanch's background was not something that ordinary disciples of the academy could know. Moreover, since he said that he would meet June Hanch soon, it would not be too long. At that time, regardless of his background, Ling Xiao did not plan to let him go easily. After all, variables meant danger. Chapter 1235. The Saint Peak is a forbidden place in our academy. Even the 4 academy masters can't enter it easily. However, if young master wants to go, I can bring you to take a look from afar. Li Jichu smiled bitterly. She did not doubt Ling Xiao's request at all. After all, in the hearts of any righteous human prodigy, the master of the Daotian prefecture was someone they truly respected. He had a great wish to establish himself and bring prosperity to the human race for thousands of generations. He had broken the shackles, ascended to the celestial pole, and reinvigorated the human race. In that case, the young master and the master were the same kind of people. They never cared about themselves but cared about the common people. Oh, forget it. I'm just saying. Since he could not enter, Ling Xiao naturally would not expose his intentions at this time. Even if the current disciples of the academy had no doubts about him, the master of the Daotian prefecture would definitely be suspicious of the intentions of everyone who approached the forbidden place. Obviously, it was not a wise choice to be noticed at this time. With Inu cooperating with Zhang Juji and Yang Yuan covering for him, there should not be too many unforeseen events on this trip. Ling Xiao only needed to wait for the master of the Daotian prefecture to appear and give a lecture before making his plans. As for Lu Ming, there was a sinister glint in Ling Xiao's eyes. He had already thought of a good way to deal with this son of destiny. Lord Ling Xiao. Lord Ling Xiao. I've finally found you. Just as Ling Xiao and Li Jichu were touring the Confucian Institute and chatting side by side, there was a sudden exclamation from the forest in the distance. A handsome young man in black strode over and bowed to Ling Xiao and Li Jichu. Young master, junior sister Li. Oh? Senior brother Lin? Junior sister, master sent me to invite Lord Ling Xiao to the Array Academy for a chat. The person who came was called Lin Li, a disciple of the Array Academy. He was under Zhong Tu's orders to invite Ling Xiao to the Array Academy to discuss admission. Oh? Uncle Master Zhong? Li Jichu frowned. She disliked this martial uncle Zhong the most out of the 4 heads. This person had a strange temperament and was unrestrained. He did not have the prestige of a teacher at all. Why was he looking for young master? Looking for me? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. To be honest, he had already borrowed the Puppet Institute's puppet technique from Wenren Zhiga's divine soul. The Confucian and Taoist academies were not attractive to him. However, the School of Array Formations was founded on the study of array formations. Cultivating the Tao of array formations and the Tao of killing was what Ling Xiao lacked. Although he had the Xian Yuan clan's heirloom, the boundary-breaking talisman, in his possession, ordinary arrays could not trap him. However, if he could control 1 or 2 ancient killing formations like the 9 Dragons Heaven Prison formation, when he fought with others, oh no, before he fought with others, he would be able to give others some surprises. That's right. Young Master, Master has prepared some small gifts for you. I hope young Master will accept them. Linley took out 3 crystal beads from his universe ring and handed them to Ling Xiao carefully. These are 3 6th-grade array beads. Although young Master will not be able to use them normally with your strength, but Master said that you can use them to liven things up. Array beads? Ling Xiao's eyes turned cold. The Daotian Academy was indeed the top academy in the Qing-Tsang continent. When it came to studying cultivation techniques, no one would dare to claim to be the best if they claimed to be second. As the name suggested, there should be 3 array formations sealed in the array bead. Sealing the array formations in a bead, one only needed to throw it out at a critical moment, and it could turn into an array formation to kill the enemy. It was simply a divine weapon. Of course, the materials used to seal the array formations were definitely rare in the world. Otherwise, the ones who controlled the world today would most likely be array masters, not cultivators. But do I lack materials? As long as Su Yan entered the Heavenly Saint Business Alliance, what materials could Ling Xiao not find in this world? At that time, he would be equipped with the 9th grade Saint Breakthrough Pill, Array Bead, and Sky Poison Pearl. Then, he would train a group of Sons of Providence who ascended from the mortal world to follow him. Just the thought of it was enough to make one excited. I wonder if young master has the time. Since the dean is so kind, it would be disrespectful if I refuse. Let's go. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently. Beside him, Li Jichu guessed the intentions of the Array Formation Academy. She immediately said angrily, "Anyway, I have nothing to do. I will accompany young master." Before the opening of the academy, Li Rulin had specially looked for her to find out about her relationship with Lord Ling Xiao. Although with young master's status, the possibility of entering the academy was very small, but as long as they could form a good relationship with young master, it would be a great fortune for the Qing-Tsang continent. Moreover, Li Jichu was the first disciple of the Academy of Confucianism. In terms of appearance, she was one of the best in the world. If she could enter young master's eyes, she would have a meteoric rise. Of course, Li Jichu naturally understood her master's intentions. She did not refuse. But now, Zhong Tu used the array bead as an excuse to lure Ling Xiao to the Array Formation Academy. Most likely, he wanted to recruit him. It was quite infuriating. Haha, of course. If junior sister is willing to come, the Array Formation Academy will always welcome you. Lin Li smiled warmly and turned to lead the way to the Array Formation Academy. Along the way, Ling Xiao also learned from Li Jichu that the first disciple of the Array Formation Academy was called Ning Chuan. He was a lunatic. The Tao that this person believed in was the true Tao of killing. In his eyes, regardless of whether it was arrays or cultivation methods, they were meaningless if they were not used to kill enemies. And what he liked to do most was to combine countless ancient killing arrays into one to pursue the ultimate pleasure of killing. In fact, even with Dao Wu Ya's level of cultivation, he was defeated by this person. It was not hard to imagine how terrifying this lunatic's combat ability was. He gave his array a grand name. It was called God Slayer. A lunatic who pursues the ultimate of killing? Ling Zhao's eyes flashed with a smile. No matter how he looked at it, this Ning Chuan did not sound like an ordinary character. Normally, in Xuanhua novels, the more unique a person was, the more terrifying his talent was. Plus, this kind of person was usually not very scheming. It was worth trying to get in touch with him. Yes, young master, you better be careful. The disciples of the Array Formation Academy are all lunatics, Li Jichu reminded him softly. However, Lin Li, who was walking in front, suddenly turned his head and gave her a sinister smile. Hiss! Suddenly, Li Jichu felt a chill rise from the soles of her feet, and her eyes flashed with resentment. Lunatic! All lunatics! With a lunatic as a master, what kind of normal disciple can he teach? Oh! Seeing this, the smile on Ling Zhao's face deepened. A genius appeared among a group of lunatics. It seemed that Ning Chuan's luck might not be lower than Lu Ming's. It was only when there was a sudden roar in the distance that Ling Xiao and the other two stopped in their tracks. Lin Li's face lit up instantly. He bowed to Ling Xiao. Young master, master is waiting for you on the Sky Array Mountain in the courtyard. My time is up. I should go and rest. Forgive me for not keeping you company. It was hard to associate Lin Li with a lunatic just by looking at his expression and appearance. But, well, this kind of behavior was very artistic. Okay, thank you for the trouble. Inexplicably, Ling Xiao was more interested in the master of the Array Formation Academy and Ning Chuan. Chapter 1236. Boom, boom, boom. In the distant mountain, there was a thunderous array. Then, a figure bathed in blood dashed out of the mountain and laughed, "Ha ha ha ha, I did it, I finally did it." It was a young man. He lost both his arms and legs, but the expression on his face was one of genuine happiness. Now Ling Xiao finally understood why the Array Division had the least number of disciples and why so few people were willing to join. "Young master, why don't we go back?" The Array Division is also considered a forbidden area by the students of the Institute. Li Jichu bitterly chuckled. She was worried that a few disciples from the Array Division would suddenly jump out and kill her. It's okay. To fall into a trap because of a crazed Dao, it seems like the leader of the Array Division is a sentimental person. Ling Xiao warmly smiled and looked up at the peak of the mountain. Unlike the Confucian Institute, the mountain where the Array Division was located did not have neatly arranged golden palaces. Instead, it was filled with thick fog. It did look eerie. Currently, on the peak of the mountain, an elder was sitting in a lotus position inside a pavilion. He was studying a Go game and did not notice the arrival of the two. Ling Xiao smiled and took the lead, walking towards the peak of the mountain. Behind him, Li Jichu hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she followed him. Even after the two of them reached the peak, Zhong Tu still did not look up at them. He only focused on the Go game. Ling Xiao was not in a hurry. He stood next to the elder with his hands behind his back and continued to study the Go game. Even though Ling Xiao was not proficient in the art of Go, when he was in Xingzhou, he exchanged for a Go game in the system. How could these Xian Huan natives compare to a Go game that has been gathering for 5,000 years? This Go game is similar to arrays. One move can change the universe. I wonder, Master Ling Xiao, have you studied this Dao? Zhong Tu held a Go piece in his hand and hesitated. Suddenly, he looked up at Ling Xiao. Black and white colors swam in his eyes, revealing many mysteries. In front of Dean Zhong, this junior naturally can't be considered an expert. I only know a little. Ling Xiao's expression was calm, neither servile nor overbearing. Oh? A little, a good little. I wonder if little friend can see the flaw in this situation? Zhong Tu grunted coldly. His temper had always been crafty and strange, and it was precisely because of this that he'd taught a group of madmen in the Tao of formations. One had to say that this person's comprehension of formations was top-notch. Furthermore, a human expert once said that once Zhong Tu became a heavenly supreme, he would be invincible in this realm. Unorthodox Daos were difficult to comprehend in the first place. However, once one mastered them, there would be a world of their own. Throughout the history of the Qing Tsang continent, there was once a human ancestor who stood at the pinnacle of the Tao of arrays. He suppressed all races and was respectfully called the Array Emperor. It was said that this person could single-handedly take on the 3,000 monarchs, and 10,000 venerables were no match for him. Of course, the rumors may have been exaggerated. However, it was obvious that the pinnacle of ancient arrays was extremely glorious. In my opinion, this piece should be placed here. Ling Xiao smiled warmly. He picked up a piece with his fingers and placed it on the board. Instantly, yin and yang intersected on the chessboard. Tens of thousands of Daos flourished. The order of the great Dao surged. Faintly, one could see tens of thousands of armies fighting, immortals and gods fighting together. Even Li Jichu's face turned pale and her footsteps staggered. At this moment, she seemed to see that the chessboard before her was no longer a chessboard. The black and white colors divided yin and yang. The dragon moved in the ocean, the tiger leaped over the mountain. The phoenix flapped its wings and flew 90,000 miles into the clouds, unobstructed by the blue sky. The chessboard, which was originally like a pool of stagnant water, was instantly filled with boundless waves. Every piece seemed to have a life of its own, moving horizontally and vertically as it fought in the heavens and earth. Beside their ears, the great blue-yellow bell rang loudly. The entire array courtyard fell into a dead silence. Next, silhouettes walked out from the depths of the mountain and looked at the peak of the mountain with shocked expressions. At this moment, Taoist rhymes overlapped and thunder rumbled incessantly. It was as if Ling Zhao's casual move had caused the heavens and earth to tremble. Zhong Tu frowned and looked surprised. He cultivated the Tao of arrays, but his chess skills were also unparalleled. He boasted that no one could surpass him on this path. However, at this moment, looking at the young man sitting quietly in front of him with a calm expression, he actually felt a kind of fear. It was a kind of fear towards the talent of the young man. The ancient Tao Heaven tablet could not withstand his might. The illusory wall image could not shake his form. The 3-foot-long sword in his hand could go against tens of thousands of enemies in the world. The 6 great demon heroes were not a match for his sword. However, he said that he knew a little about chess, but he could actually cause such a phenomenon to descend from the heavens. How could there be such a monstrous young man in this world? Ling people's 100,000 years of accumulation. Are they really going to prosper in this world? Senior. Ling Xiao smiled and his eyes shone brightly. He did not waver at all because of the heavenly scene before him. These old things have always liked to use chess to test one's talent. Little did they know that even though he did not know a lot about chess, he used all living beings as his chess pieces and the heavens and earth as his game. How could this little bamboo board stop him? What a little bit! Zhong Tu sighed and nodded. I can see that you are extremely talented and you are an immortal who cultivates arrays. How about this? Suddenly, Zhong Tu's expression turned serious. I will accept you as my disciple on behalf of my master. Once you have mastered the Tao of arrays, I will give you the position of the Dean of Arrays. How about that? What? Hearing this, Ling Zhao's expression did not change much. On the other hand, Li Zichu's beautiful eyes widened. Giving the position of the Dean to someone else. Uncle Master Zhong is indeed you. This was the first time she heard of someone accepting a disciple on behalf of their master. But from this, it was obvious that this array master approved of Ling Xiao. Dean, you are exaggerating. My talent is nothing special. I was merely lucky to have a good chess piece. How can I take on such a heavy responsibility? Plus, a wisp of vicissitudes suddenly appeared in Ling Zhao's eyes. His expression was inexplicably heavy. The demons have yet to be eliminated. How would Ling Xiao dare to covet stability? My Tao is in the mortal world, not in the sacred grounds. Even with Zhong Tu's mentality, he was still shocked by the light emitted from Ling Zhao's body. The Ren Huang of the age did not have an undeserved reputation. Oh well, why don't you and I play a game of chess? If I win, you will become the honorary dean of the array division. Oh! Ling Xiao raised an eyebrow. The honorary dean of the array division can enjoy the resources of the array division. This old thing sure has a unique way of recruiting people. What if I win? If you win, I'll give you an ancient formation. Zhong Tu's expression was calm. Even though Ling Zhao's talent was terrifying and unparalleled since the beginning of time, he still did not believe that a young man could win against him in chess. I don't want the array. If I win, I will ask Ning Chuan to follow me down the mountain. We will kill the demons and bring peace to the world. Ling Zhao's words changed Zhong Tu's expression. After a moment of silence, he nodded softly. Okay, I will do as you say. Buzz. Then, he waved his hand and cleared the chessboard before him. On his aged face, there was a trace of heaviness. It was obvious that in his eyes, Ling Xiao was a real opponent regardless of age. Chapter 1237. Buzz. under the ancient pavilion at the peak of the Array Mountain. Two figures, one old and one young, sat opposite each other. They each played a chess piece and focused on the chessboard in front of them. As the two of them kept placing chess pieces, divine radiance shone on the chessboard. Strange phenomena rose. Divine swords and halberds opened and closed. Ancient bells and liu emitted divine radiance at the same time. It encompassed an era and covered the sky. Endless Taoist rhymes covered the chessboard and turned the black and white chess pieces into illusions. The seven-colored light shone and the entire chessboard seemed to have turned into a battlefield. Axes, knives, forks, swords, halberds, hooks, and thorns appeared out of nowhere. With Li Jichu's cultivation, she only felt that everything in front of her was illusory and real. Unknowingly, her Taoist heart trembled and her aura withered. She didn't dare to look at the chessboard anymore. Compared to Li Jichu, Zhong Tu was undoubtedly more shocked. He was at the peak of the Sage Realm and was famous for his Array Dao. Although Array Dao and Chess Dao sounded unrelated, they all relied on the heart to enter the Dao and reverse the situation. On the other hand, Ling Xiao was a newly born young master of the ancient clan. No matter how talented he was, how could he cultivate his heart to such a level? Although the two of them didn't use any spiritual power, the exchange of Taoist techniques was more exhausting. Time passed slowly. Countless disciples of the academy had already gathered under the Array Mountain. Even some of the Saint Stage elders had a look of shock on their faces. In particular, Zhong Tu's gradually solemn expression and the sweat that seeped out of his forehead gave people an extremely unreal feeling. He was the master of the four courtyards. How could he be forced into such a predicament by a young man in the Sage Realm? Boom! When the auspicious clouds above the blue sky dissipated, a shocking aura descended. Thousands of Taoists were destroyed and the treasure light was silent. Zhong Tu raised his chess piece and didn't place it down. At this moment, there seemed to be waves in his eyes. Even his arms were trembling slightly. In his heart, a storm was raging. If he lost, no matter where he placed his chess piece, the situation was already over. No matter how much he hesitated, it was just a last-ditch struggle. Sigh, in the end, Zhong Tu sighed softly. His imposing aura abruptly dispersed, and even the phenomenon in space silently stopped and collapsed. The younger generation will surpass us in time. No matter how unwilling Zhong Tu was, he had no choice but to admit that Ling Zhao's temperament and strength had probably long surpassed the scope of the current generation. Of course, if he was just a teenager, his temperament would be terrifying. However, since he had the sacred name of the human emperor, he had to shoulder the mission and responsibility of advancing the human race. Impeccable! How laughable! Previously, I actually wanted to become sworn brothers with him. Looking at it now, just based on his temperament alone, this Ling Xiao is at least at the level of a master father. Senior, thank you for letting me win. Ling Xiao smiled faintly and looked at the black figure standing on the mountain path in the distance. 7th rank Exalted Realm, 17,000 karmic luck, 10,000 formations, and slaughter. It was a young man with a pair of strange eyes. They were pitch black and deep, without a trace of white in them. From afar, it looked like a pair of ghostly eyes, emotionless and without any ripples. A slightly pale face, delicate and elegant, tranquil and indifferent. His black hair was tied up in a bun, and it was slightly messy. He stood there silently, like the gentle wind blowing through the mountains. Chuan come here. Zhong Tu waved his hand and called the young man over from the mountain. If it was said that he had never thought that one day he would give his proudest disciple to someone else in the form of gambling, then at this moment, he was somewhat relieved. Ling Zhao's talent was already needless to say. Today, he used chess to prove his heart and was unparalleled in the world. Although Ning Chuan was a genius in the Tao of Arrays, he was antisocial and his Tao heart was evil. Once he fell into the demonic path one day, it was very likely that he would become a great demon that wreaked havoc in the world. At that time, not only would Zhong Tu's reputation be gone, even the Daotian Academy would become a complete laughingstock. On the other hand, Ling Xiao was full of righteousness and strength of character. With Chuan Er's personality, he might be able to break free from his obsession to kill if he followed him every day. More importantly, Ling Xiao's immortal appearance was unparalleled. Perhaps only he could gain Ning Chuan's approval. Master. Ning Chuan's voice was just like his appearance, clear and gentle, without a trace of hostility. From his appearance, it was very difficult to connect him with the lunatic that Li Jichu spoke of. This is Master Ling Xiao. Zhong Tu sighed, and a wisp of vicissitudes of life suddenly appeared on his face. You've already grasped the 72 ancient ultimate arrays of my formation department. Master has nothing else to teach you. In the future, follow the young lord and enter the world to gain experience. Every dragon had to have some dragon guards behind them. Even if the sector lord dominated the world and was undefeatable, the one who controlled the Azure world was still the sector lord's palace, not him alone. The 7 palace lords were all world-shocking. It was because of their followers that the sector lord could control the Azure world for 100,000 years without anyone having any thoughts of betrayal. Ling Xiao had the demeanor of a Ren Huang and the potential of an emperor. If Ning Chuan followed him into the chaotic world, it might be a way out. Enter the world? Ning Chuan frowned. For the first time, a trace of emotion appeared in his dark eyes. I have made a promise with the young master. From today onwards, you will follow him and leave the array department. Zhong Tu said lightly and turned to walk down the mountain. He knew that with Ning Chuan's temperament, there will be a battle to make him submit to someone. Even though he trusted this young disciple a lot, and even though Zhong Tu believed that he was the true number 1 of the 4 academies, he still had no chance of winning against Ling Xiao. Let's go. Watching the elder's silhouette leave, Ling Xiao's face was emotionless. He felt the desire to fight in Ning Chuan's eyes. A lunatic like him would not submit to anyone. The best way to make him submit was to fight. Master agreed to let me follow you, but that doesn't mean I will. As expected. At this moment, Ning Chuan only spoke indifferently. He had no intention of following Ling Xiao. Oh? You are wrong. I don't want you to follow me. Ling Xiao turned his head and looked coldly at the slender figure in black. The corners of his mouth suddenly curled up in a sinister smile. What I want is for you to submit to me. Don't even think about it. Black and white chi swirled in Ning Chuan's eyes. He took a step forward and tens of thousands of daos appeared around him. As divine radiance surged, the ground of the ancient mountain beneath his feet actually directly crumbled apart, creating a 10,000-foot-long crack. Then, he extended his finger. Wherever his gaze landed, rays of strange black light howled and opened. They turned into tens of thousands of blossoms, each blossoms different. Countless chains of order opened and formed layers of daos. Instantly, the void was sealed and the runes flickered, trapping Ling Xiao's silhouette. If you leave now, you may still have a chance. Ning Chuan stood in the middle of the blossoms. His eyes were cold and his lips curled into a bloodthirsty smile. At this moment, he finally revealed the attitude of a lunatic who yearns to kill. Not good. It's the ancient array of the Slayer of Gods, Ning Chuan. Stop! Outside the ancient pavilion, Li Jichu's pretty face turned pale, and a wisp of heartfelt fear appeared in her eyes. Chapter 1238. Buzz. Buzzing sounds could be heard from all directions. Boundless killing intent formed clouds and covered the sky. As if they'd noticed the commotion here, the entire Daotian Academy suddenly fell into deathly silence. Countless disciples of the Academy walked out of the ancient hall and looked into the distance, and their eyes were filled with a wisp of dense terror. It's the aura of the ancient God Slayer formation, That lunatic, what is he doing now? Ning Chuan's name was several times more famous than Dao Wuya's in the Daotian Academy. He killed mercilessly, both good and evil. If it weren't for his indifferent nature and dislike of noise, the entire academy would have been turned upside down by him. Even so, many disciples were still wary of the Formation Academy. Even some elders who had just entered the sage realm wouldn't step in easily. It was rumored that Ning Chuan's pupils could see through yin and yang, break the universe, and form an array with a glance. In fact, even the 72 ancient ultimate formations of the formation department were merged into his eyes. Wherever his gaze landed, tens of thousands of formations would appear at the same time. In fact, what was even more frightening was that this lunatic was trying to merge the 72 arrays into one and name it the Ancient God Slayer Formation. Such an action was no different from a lunatic. After all, even Zhong Tu, who was famous in the Azure continent, couldn't easily merge two ancient arrays into one. But Ning Chuan did it. It was said that he had merged 9 arrays, and the Ancient God Slayer Formation was already evident. He was invincible under the Supremacy Realm. On the peak of the Formation Mountain, 2 figures faced each other from afar. However, there wasn't a trace of surprise on Ling Zhao's face. Even though the Formation Dao before him was like an ocean that could destroy the world, his eyes were still cold and indifferent. If this Ning Chuan was only worthy of a karmic luck-plundering talisman. As long as he dared to disobey, Ling Xiao had 10,000 ways to kill him on the spot. Extreme craziness meant extreme calmness. To outsiders, Ning Chuan was a murderous and irrational person. However, in Ling Zhao's eyes, it was the exact opposite. This young man was so rational that it was terrifying. However, his rationality was all used on the Formation Dao and not the ways of the world. Such a person might seem unapproachable, but in truth, he was much easier to control. As long as you were strong enough to completely crush him, and at the same time, acknowledge his Dao heart and aspirations, he would feel a sense of belonging from the bottom of his heart. To put it simply, they were giving him a stage to slaughter to his heart's content. God-slaying, forbidden blood. Ning Chuan's voice was distant and unhurried, carrying a coldness that looked down on all living things. Wherever Ling Zhao's gaze passed by, tens of thousands of formation runes gathered together and formed a blood-red formation out of thin air. Then, it descended upon Ling Zhao's head. The void collapsed, and life was obliterated. Boundless killing intent surged and overflowed from the formation, forming a sea of blood that was filled with an ancient bloodthirsty aura. Ling Xiao raised his head and looked at the blood formation that covered the blue sky. His eyes were bright and there was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. At this moment, he didn't even see Ning Chuan setting up the array. He only felt that the array patterns in Ning Chuan's eyes were flowing, creating an array out of thin air. Such a method was indeed worthy of his providence. Moreover, given the nature of these children of destiny, the blood restriction formation in front of them was probably not his true trump card. Buzz. The blood formation fell and emptied 1,000 miles. The entire mountain let out an ear-piercing roar at this moment. If it wasn't for the formation, it would have been crushed by the killing aura. But, just as Li Jichu's pretty face turned pale and her righteous aura turned into a dazzling sun, Ling Xiao suddenly raised 2 fingers and drew in the void. Boom! 3,000 sword intents gathered together like the Milky Way pouring down from the sky, shattering the blue sky. The tens of thousands of blood runes were instantly annihilated and disappeared under the sword aura, leaving only a few ripples in the air. Heaven and earth were silent. The entire array courtyard was silent. At this moment, all the disciples and elders were looking at the black-robed figure standing on the mountain peak with his hands behind his back in shock. At this moment, it was as if they were looking at an immortal. Although Ling Xiao had already displayed his terrifying sword Dao prowess when he fought the 5 heroes of the demon race. However, compared to the 5 demon race prodigies, Ning Chuan was undoubtedly more intimidating in the hearts of the disciples of the academy. He was an array madman who immersed himself in killing. Every single one of his arrays existed for the sake of killing. Even so, before Lord Ling Xiao, this first apprentice of the array courtyard did not seem to be intimidating at all. Above the void, Ning Chuan's brows were tightly locked together as he coldly stared at the sword intent that filled the air. Not only was there not a trace of shock in his eyes, but there was also a strong desire to fight. It really is, at this moment there seemed to be a kind of unsatisfied expectation on his face. A pair of strange black eyes flashed with a light that made one's heart palpitate. I haven't been this excited in a long time. Then, under everyone's shocked gazes, a bloody mist began to rise around Ning Chuan's body, and a heartfelt smile blossomed on his face. Surging blood energy rushed into the sky, covering the sky and evolving into endless divine patterns. Faintly, an ancient and boundless murderous intent was awakening and spreading from the blood runes. If you test me again, I'm afraid you won't have a chance. Ling Zhao's eyes were clear as he stood on the mountain peak with his hands behind his back. There was not a trace of emotion on his face. If this was in the past, he would have killed Ning Chuan a long time ago. But right now, if he wanted to take this array Dao prodigy in his hands, he would have to shatter his Dao heart and teach him what it meant to be subdued. Ha, god-slaying. Level 9 blood pinnacle. Ning Chuan's smile was eerie and his eyes were fierce. Countless cracks suddenly appeared in the sky. From afar, it looked like the heavens had collapsed and shattered into 9 layers of wave. Thousands of array runes rushed up like living creatures, turning into waves that covered all directions. A blood array that occupied the universe, including the stars and the sun, slowly descended from the sky. Right now there was wind, thunder, and a sea of fire inside the array. Every strand of energy contained indescribable destruction. Pucci, even with Ning Chuan's strength, forming this killing array seemed to have consumed all of his spiritual energy. His face paled and a trace of blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. However, right now there was still no trace of dejection on his face. Instead, he stared at the blood array that covered the sky, his eyes full of tenderness. The killing begins. Above the void, Ning Chuan closed his eyes slowly and raised both hands, as if he wanted to embrace the array. As his voice faded, hundreds of millions of divine runes suddenly lit up in the blood formation. With a momentum that could cover the sky, it rumbled and enveloped Ling Xiao. Buzz! The sky cracked and the terrifying heavenly might covered the world, annihilating everything. Li Jichu's pretty face was pale and her eyes were filled with defeat. However, just as she lifted her leg and was about to dash toward Ling Xiao, a palm suddenly landed on her shoulder and pinned her to the ground. Senior sister, if you go over now, you'll be courting death. Lu Ming frowned and his eyes trembled as he looked at the blood sea divine Sunday. Even with his temperament, he felt endless fear at this moment. Not to mention Li Jichu, even if it was him, he would definitely die if he was enveloped by this array. Ling Xiao, you're too arrogant this time around. You're facing an array Dao monster and you're giving him time to attack? Chapter 1239. No! If anything happens to young master in my academy. Li Jichu clenched her teeth and struggled to free herself from Lu Ming's grasp. She wanted to head to the peak of the mountain. He's right. You'd better not go over. There was a sudden ripple in the void. Zhong Tu's figure appeared in the sky and stopped Li Jichu in her tracks. Uncle Master Zhong! Hurry up and save young master! Li Jichu's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. Even her voice was mixed with a trace of anger. She knew it. This array faculty was a bunch of lunatics. Young master should not have come here. Was Ning Chuan's brain really damaged? He actually had such murderous intent towards a stranger. Once Ling Xiao died here today, not to mention the array faculty, even the entire Daotian Academy might be destroyed. Let's wait a little longer. Zhong Tu shook his head slightly. He had hesitated when Ning Chuan used his own blood power to activate the god-slaying ancient array. However, when he saw the calm look on Ling Zhao's face, he had some expectations. He wanted to see if this legendary invincible contemporary was really invincible in this world. He naturally knew Ning Chuan's character very well. If Ling Xiao could not crush him head-on, he would not follow him to fight for the world. This battle was inevitable. Wait, Uncle Master Zhong, what if young Master? Oh! Zhong Tu frowned slightly and glanced coldly at Li Zichu. Instantly, her body trembled. She could only feel an endless force descending from the sky. Her face turned pale immediately. Buzz! At the same time, on the peak of the mountain, there was a sea of blood surging, covering thousands of miles of the sky. As for that peerless figure in black, he was already shrouded in the sea of blood. There was no trace of him anymore. Boom! Boom! In the blood array, a strange phenomenon rose. Endless blood turned into demons and monsters, hissing continuously. Ning Chuan pursed his lips and smiled. He suddenly formed a seal with both hands. The trace of blood at the corner of his mouth looked even more sinister and evil. Buzz! The blood radiance that filled the sky suddenly gathered together. The great formation that had originally enveloped the heavens was actually compressed to the size of several dozen feet in the instant that Ning Chuan's palm landed. However, the surging murderous aura within suddenly rose at this moment. No. Young Master, Li Zichu looked aghast. Even though she was extremely far away from the blood formation, just the wisp of opportunity that was emitted from it was enough to make her heart tremble. It was impossible for anyone below the Exalt realm to resist such terrifying might. Boom! Before Li Zichu could utter a cry of despair, the blood formation suddenly stirred up a huge spiritual wave. It was as if 100,000 meteors were falling at the same time, directly blasting the entire formation mountain into nothingness. Zhong Tu's eyes narrowed slightly. His figure soared into the sky, and the spirit radiance around his body bloomed. He threw out a formation bead in his hand, and it turned into an ancient formation of golden light out of thin air, blocking the scattered formation power. However, even with his strength at the 9th grade saint stage, his body still trembled at this moment. It was obvious that he had suffered quite a bit of backlash from the surging blood-red light. Not good, at this moment, a trace of panic finally appeared on Zhong Tu's face. It seemed like he had gone too far? This was the first time Ning Chuan had used the 9 heavenly blood formations. Even though Zhong Tu knew that the combination of the 9 paths ancient killing formations would naturally have an earth-shattering power. However, he seemed to have underestimated the terror of this formation. With his cultivation level, just the remnant power of the formation alone had almost shattered his physical body. One could only imagine what kind of terrifying power Ling Xiao, who was in the formation, had endured. It's over. Originally, Zhong Tu thought that even if his little disciple's talent was unparalleled and his formation skills were unparalleled, it would still take time to form the formation. With Lord Ling Zhao's temperament and means, how could he give him a chance to make a move? But he never thought that his young master would be so careless. From the beginning to the end, he did not move at all. He just stood there in a daze and was destroyed by the 9 paths ancient killing formations? Cough cough. Above the void, Ning Chuan looked coldly at the disappearing ancient mountain below him. He coughed up blood, but his eyes were filled with extreme madness. To be honest, he did not care who the young master of the Ling people was. However, he had seen the scene when Ling Xiao and his master were playing chess just now. His immortal appearance was unparalleled. Indeed, he had the potential to be a talent of the current generation. However, so what? In front of his killing formation, all living things, could only be slaughtered. Ning Chuan took a deep breath. His figure descended from the sky and headed deep into the mountains. It was time to try to integrate the 10th killing formation into the slaying god. This is your means? The top disciple of the array formation faculty? However, just as Ning Chuan took a step forward, he suddenly heard a faint laughter behind him. Immediately after, a figure walked out of the smoke and dust, surrounded by sword intent, opening up heaven and earth. At this moment, there was a gentle and calm smile on his face. Even the black clothes on his body were not stained by a trace of dust. Young master! At the foot of the mountain, Li Jichu's eyes trembled. Her hands were unconsciously clenched together. Her heart, which was originally hanging in the air, finally relaxed completely. Even Lu Ming and Zhong Tu had a look of horror and shock on their faces. How could it be possible? How did this Ling Xiao avoid the power of the slaying god array? Ning Chuan stopped in his tracks. He turned to look at the place where the smoke and dust had dissipated. His eyes were cold. How did you do it? If this is your trump card, then you can go and die now. Ling Xiao shook his head slightly. Although his tone was gentle, the murderous intent in his words was not concealed. Humph, arrogant, Ning Chuan snorted coldly. Black and white colors swirled in his eyes again. However, this time, Ling Xiao did not give him any chance. At this moment, there was a sudden flash of brilliance in the void above. Ning Chuan only felt that the space within a radius of 100 miles had stagnated and time had ceased to exist. Before he could react, that peerless figure in black had already appeared in front of him. Surrender or die. Ling Xiao stretched out his palm and grabbed Ning Chuan's neck directly. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile that made one shudder with fear. You want me to surrender? Ning Chuan gritted his teeth fiercely. His eyes were full of coldness. However, before he finished his words, Ling Xiao shook his head slightly and said in a low voice, I can give you countless opportunities and give you the right to kill. Think about it carefully. In a place where no one understands and you have never experienced real killing, how can you create a real slaying god array? Beat. The chosen one's Tao heart trembles. Congratulations to the host for plundering 2,000 luck points and 20,000 villain points. Hearing the notification sound, a sinister look flashed across Ling Xiao's eyes. He directly threw the dazed youth aside and turned to walk down the mountain. Chapter 1240. Plop. On the Array Mountain, Ning Chuan was at a loss. His originally pale face had long turned gloomy. He turned his head to look at the distant figure. His lips trembled slightly, but he did not know what to say. A real massacre? That's right. His eyes were naturally different. They could be divided into yin and yang, containing heaven and earth. He only needed a glance to deduce the trajectory of any array formation and find its flaws. However, his way of thinking was indeed not tolerated by the world. Even his master often complained that he killed too much and did not allow him to leave the mountain on his own. If cultivation was not for killing, then why would the path of immortality be filled with bones? He would kill until no one in the world was his mat. He would kill gods with his mortal body and return true freedom to the world. Wasn't that right? Blood rippled in Ning Chuan's eyes. For the first time, he wavered. The right to kill. Sensing the sudden bloodlust from the young man behind him, the smile on Ling Xiao's face deepened. He believed that a lunatic who truly yearned to kill would definitely not be able to resist his temptation. If he resisted, it would only prove that he was not crazy enough. Ning Chuan's array formation attack had indeed surprised Ling Xiao. In particular, the unparalleled murderous aura of the 9-layered killing array had even made him feel threatened. If not for the fact that Ling Xiao had entered the realm at the critical moment, even with his body that was comparable to a supreme's, he would have been in an extremely sorry state. If the 9-layered killing array could already be so powerful, it was hard to imagine how powerful it would be when Ning Chuan integrated all 72 ancient killing arrays. Of course, if Ning Chuan was still unwilling to follow him in the end, he would only end up in an extremely miserable state. At the very least, his eyes were very enchanting. Young master! At the foot of the mountain, Li Jichu's pretty face was radiant as she strode towards Ling Xiao. Lu Ming, who was beside her, frowned slightly but did not show any obvious hostility. He also lifted his feet and followed her. Young master! How are you? Are you hurt? Li Jichu looked at Ling Xiao from head to toe with concern. On the other hand, Ling Xiao smiled as he shook his head. His tone was bitter as he said, Ning Chuan's strength is truly incomparably powerful. If not for the spiritual item that the ancestor gave me to protect myself, just that formation alone would have been enough to seriously injure me. Spiritual item for protection? Upon hearing that, Lu Ming and Zhong Tu, who was in the distance, had a flash of realization in their eyes. No wonder! No matter how monstrous this Ling Xiao is, how could he possibly resist Ning Chuan's 9-fold slaughtering formation with his fleshly body? It turned out that he had borrowed the power of the Ling people's treasures. The two of them didn't doubt his words at all. After all, with the resources of the Ling people, even if Ling Xiao took out a supreme weapon, they would still be able to accept it. Jichu, this is… Ling Xiao turned his head and looked at Lu Ming, who was beside him. At this moment, the latter was smiling and bowing to him. Lord Ling Xiao, my name is Lu Ming. I'm a disciple of the Confucian Academy and senior sister Jichu's junior brother from the same lineage. So it's junior brother Lu. It's an honor to meet you. Ling Xiao smiled but didn't take a second look at Lu Ming. He turned and said to Li Jichu, Jichu, aren't you going to bring me around? Let's go. It's getting dark and quieter. Okay. Young master, then I'll bring you to my Daotian Academy's wonder, the moon-gazing platform. Li Jichu's eyes trembled slightly. There was a trace of heartfelt joy on her face. Jichu? This seemed to be the first time young master addressed her so intimately. It was just that she felt uneasy as if happiness had suddenly befallen her. Senior. Sister, today is the day we cultivate the Haoran sword intent. Lu Ming's face was gloomy. In particular, Ling Zhao's undisguised flirtatious tone made him even angrier. Ling people's young master was loyal and righteous. Everyone knew about this. However, why did he suddenly feel that there was a hint of hypocrisy? Oh, that's right. Young master, then I'll go back to the Confucian Academy first. I can ask master for 2 pots of his secret collection of morality brew. At that time, we'll admire the moon and drink wine. We won't go back until we're drunk. Li Jichu nodded slightly. She seemed to have suddenly thought of something and smiled gently. Pfft. At the side, Lu Ming felt a pressure in his chest. His mouth opened slightly and blood flowed out by itself. Oh? Junior brother Lu? What happened to you? Ling Xiao frowned slightly and looked at Lu Ming with concern. Junior brother Lu, do you have an unmentionable illness? Lu Ming gritted his teeth and suppressed the anger in his heart. I accidentally bit my tongue. Ling Xiao cast a meaningful glance at Lu Ming. His expression was as if he was looking at a fool. Lu Ming only took a deep breath when Ling Xiao and Li Jichu walked far away. After bidding farewell to Zhong Tu, he chased after the 2 of them. Junior brother Lu, accompany young master to the full moon platform first. I'll be back soon. With that, Li Jichu took the lead and left in a flash. On the other hand, Lu Ming walked side by side with Ling Xiao toward the depths of the academy. Previously, I saw young master and praising the Empress ascending to the divine Tao together. They are really an immortal couple. Everyone is envious. Lu Ming's gaze was cold and his tone was extremely indifferent. He did not know why, but he felt that this young master of Ling people in front of him had a sinister and evil aura. Haha, is that so? Ling Xiao shook his head and glanced at Li Jichu's back view inadvertently. Of course, this scene did not escape Lu Ming's eyes. Young master, are you interested in my senior sister? Oh? Junior brother Lu, what are you talking about? Jichu and I are just ordinary friends. It's just that we have similar interests. Therefore we are closer. Junior brother Lu, don't talk nonsense. Ling Xiao looked surprised. However, the more he tried to hide it, the more Lu Ming felt that he was hypocritical. My senior sister is simple-minded and she is very loyal when it comes to relationship. I think her Dao partner should be someone with a gentle temperament and good character. Don't you think so, young master? Lu Ming stopped in his tracks and looked at Ling Xiao coldly. At this moment, the suspicion in his heart seemed to have been confirmed. This young master of Ling people might not be as righteous as what the world said. Under his bright and upright image, there was another hypocritical and sinister face. Of course, who wouldn't want a girl like Jichu? She has many choices. Ling Xiao smiled faintly. Lu Ming had already clenched his fists tightly. Obviously, he was on the verge of exploding. It was just that. After all, he was only a disciple of the Confucian Academy. His status and identity were worlds apart from Ling Xiao's. Even if he told the world Ling Xiao's true colors now, no one would believe him. After all, this was all based on his intuition. However, he had an inexplicable feeling that Ling Xiao was definitely not as gentle and kind as the world thought. No, I don't care about others, but senior sister must not be deceived by him. I won't allow anyone to hurt Jichu. Lu Ming's eyes suddenly shone brightly. Although he had seen Ling Xiao's terrifying combat ability with his own eyes, he still did not have too many concerns. This was because he had a supreme treasure in his hands that could defeat all enemies in the world. Once this treasure was out, even if Ling Xiao had a defensive sacred weapon, it was not worth mentioning. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.